Chapter 8, in which Michael Finsbury enjoys a holiday. Punctually at 8 o'clock next morning, the lawyer rattled, according to previous appointment, on the studio door. He found the artist sadly altered for the worse. Bleached, bloodshot, and chalky, a man upon wires, the tale of his haggard, I still wandering to the closet. Nor was the professor drawing less inclined to wonder at his friend. Michael was usually attired in the height of fashion, with a certain mercantile brilliancy best described perhaps as stylish. Nor could anything be said against him as a rule, but that he looked a trifle too like a wedding guest to be quite a gentleman. Today he had fallen altogether from these heights. He wore a flannel shirt of washed-out shepherd's tartan and a suit of reddish tweeds of the color known to tailors as heather mixture. His neckcloth was black and tied loosely in a sailor's knot. A rusty ulster partly concealed these advantages, and his feet were shod with rough walking boots. His hat was an old soft felt, which he removed with a flourish as he entered. "Here I am, William Dent," he cried, and drawing from his pocket 2 little wisps of reddish hair. He held them to his cheeks like side whiskers and danced about the studio with the filmy graces of a ballet girl. Pittman laughed sadly. "I should never have known you," said he. "Nor were you intended to," returned Michael, replacing his false whiskers in his pocket. "Now we must overhaul you in your wardrobe and disguise you up to the nines." "Disguise!" cried the artist. "Must I indeed disguise myself? Has it come to that?" "My dear creature," returned the companion, "disguise is the spice of life." "What is life?" passionately exclaimed the French philosopher, "without the pleasures of disguise? I don't say it's always good taste, and I know it's unprofessional. But what's the odds? Downhearted drawing master? It has to be. We have to leave a false impression on the minds of many persons, and in particular on the mind of Mr. Gideon Forsyth, the young gentleman I know by sight, if he should have the bad taste to be at home." "If he be at home," faltered the artist, "that would be the end of all." "Won't matter, A.D., returned Michael airily. "Let me see your clothes, and I'll make a new man of you in a jiffy." In the bedroom, to which he was at once conducted, Michael examined Pittman's poor and scanty wardrobe with a humorous eye, picked out a short jacket of black alpaca, and presently added to that a pair of summer trousers which somehow took his fancy as incongruous. Then, with the garments in his hand, he scrutinized the artist closely. "I don't like that clerical collar," he remarked. "Have you nothing else?" The professor, drawing, pondered for a moment, and then brightened. "I have a pair of low-necked shirts," he said, "that I used to wear in Paris as a student. They are rather loud." "The very thing," ejaculated Michael. "You'll look perfectly beastly. Here are spats, too," he continued, drawing forth a pair of those offensive little gaiters. "Must have spats. And now you jump into these and whistle a tune at the window for, say, 3/4 an hour. After that you can rejoin me on the field of glory." So saying, Michael returned to the studio. It was a morning of the easterly gale. The wind blew shrilly among the statues in the garden and drove the rain upon the skylight in the studio's ceiling. And at about the same moment of the time when Morris attacked the 100th version of his uncle's signature in Bloomsbury, Michael, in Chelsea, began to rip the wires out of Broadwood Grand. 3/4 of an hour later Pittman was admitted, to find the closet door standing open, the closet untenanted, and the piano discreetly shut. "It's a remarkably heavy instrument," observed Michael, and turned to consider his friend's disguise. "You must shave off that beard of yours," he said. "My beard!" cried Pittman. "I cannot shave my beard. I cannot tamper with my appearance. My principals would object. They hold very strong views as to the appearance of professors. Young ladies are considered so romantic. My beard was regarded as quite a feature when I went about the place." "It was regarded," said the artist, with rising color. "It was regarded as unbecoming." "You can let it grow again," returned Michael, "and then you'll be so precious ugly that they'll raise your salary." "But I don't want to be ugly," cried the artist. "Don't be an ass," said Michael, who hated beards and was delighted to destroy one. "Off with it like a man." "Of course, if you insist," said Pittman. And then he sighed, fetched some hot water from the kitchen, and setting a glass upon his easel, first clipped his beard with scissors and then shaved his chin. He could not conceal from himself, as he regarded the result, that his last claims to manhood had been sacrificed, but Michael seemed delighted. "A new man, I declare," he cried. "When I give you the window glass spectacles I have in my pocket, you'll be the beau ideal of a French commercial traveler." Pittman did not reply, but continued to gaze disconsolately on his image in the glass. "Do you know," asked Michael, "what the governor of South Carolina said to the governor of North Carolina? 'It's a long time between drinks,' observed that powerful thinker. 'And if you will put your hand into the top left-hand pocket of my ulster, I have an impression you will find a flask of brandy. Thank you, Pittman,' he added, as he filled out a glass for each. 'Now you will give me news of this.' The artist reached out his hand for the water jug, but Michael arrested the movement. 'Not if you went upon your knees,' he cried. 'This is the finest liqueur brandy in Great Britain.' Pittman put his lips to it, set it down again, and sighed. 'Well, I must say you're the poorest companion for a holiday,' cried Michael. 'If that's all you know of brandy, you shall have no more of it, and while I finish the flask, you may as well begin business. Come to think of it,' he broke off, 'I have made an abominable error. You should have ordered the cart before you were disguised. Why, Pittman, what the devil's the use of you? Why couldn't you have reminded me of that?' 'I never even knew there was a cart to be ordered,' said the artist. 'But I can take off the disguise again,' he suggested eagerly. 'You would find it rather a bother to put on your beard,' observed the lawyer. 'No, it's a false step, the sort of thing that hangs people,' he continued with eminent cheerfulness as he sipped his brandy. 'And it can't be retraced now. Off to the Mews with you. Make all the arrangements. There, take the piano from here. Cart it to Victoria, and dispatch it thence by rail to Cannon Street, to lie till called for in the name of Fortune du Boisco Bay.' 'Isn't that rather an awkward name?' pleaded Pittman. 'Awkward?' cried Michael scornfully. 'It would hang us both. Brown is both safer and easier to pronounce. Call it Brown.' 'I wish,' said Pittman. 'For my sake, I wish you wouldn't talk so much of hanging.' 'Talking about it's nothing, my boy,' returned Michael. 'But take your hat and be off, and mind and pay everything beforehand.' Left to himself, the lawyer turned his attention for some time exclusively to the liqueur brandy, and his spirits, which had been pretty fair all morning, now prodigiously rose. He proceeded to adjust his whiskers finally before the glass. 'Devilish rich,' he remarked, as he contemplated his reflection. 'I look like a purser's mate.' And at that moment the window glass spectacles, which he had hitherto destined for Pittman, flashed into his mind. He put them on and fell in love with the effect. 'Just what I required,' he said. 'I wonder what I look like now. A humorous novelist, I should think.' And he began to practice diverse characters of walk, naming them to himself as, he proceeded, 'Walk of a humorous novelist. But that would require an umbrella. Walk of a purser's mate. Walk of an Australian colonist, revisiting the scenes of childhood. Walk of Sepoy Colonel, ditto, ditto.' And in the midst of the Sepoy Colonel, which was an excellent assumption, although inconsistent with the style of his makeup, his eye lighted on the piano. This instrument was made to lock both at the top and at the keyboard, but the key of the latter had been mislaid. Michael opened it and ran his fingers over the dumb keys. 'Fine instrument, full, rich tone,' he observed, and he drew in a seat. When Mr. Pittman returned to the studio, he was appalled to observe his guide, philosopher, and friend performing miracles of execution on the silent grand. 'Heaven help me,' thought the little man. 'I fear he has been drinking.' 'Mr. Finsbury,' he said aloud, and Michael, without rising, turned upon him a countenance somewhat flushed, encircled with a bush of the red whiskers, and bestridden by the spectacles. 'Capriccio in B-flat on the departure of a friend,' said he, continuing his noiseless evolutions. Indignation awoke in the mind of Pittman. 'Those spectacles were to be mine,' he cried. 'They are an essential part of my disguise.' 'I am going to wear them myself,' replied Michael, and he added, with some show of truth, 'there would be a devil a lot of suspicion aroused if we both wore spectacles.' 'Oh, well,' said the assenting Pittman, 'I rather counted on them. But of course, if you insist. And at any rate, here's the car at the door.' While the men were at work, Michael concealed himself in the closet among the debris of the barrel and the wires of the piano, and as soon as the coast was clear, the pair sallied forth by the lane, jumped into a hansom in the King's Road, and were driven rapidly toward town. It was still cold and raw and boisterous, The rain beat strongly in their faces, but Michael refused to have a glass let down. He had now suddenly donned the character of Cicerone and pointed out and lucidly commented on the sights of London as they drove. "My dear fellow," he said, "you don't seem to know anything of your native city. Suppose we visited the Tower? No? Well, perhaps it's a trifle out of our way." It would be difficult to express what Pittman suffered in the cab. Cold, wet, terror in the capital degree, a grounded distrust of the commander under whom he served, a sense of imprudency in the matter of the low-necked shirt, a bitter sense of the decline and fall involved in the deprivation of his beard. All these were among the ingredients of the bowl. To reach the restaurant, for which they were deviously steering, was a first relief. To hear Michael bespeak a private room was a second and a still greater. Nor, as they mounted the stair under the guidance of an unintelligible alien, did he fail to note with gratitude the fewness of the persons present, or the still more cheering fact that the greater part of these were exiles from the land of France. It was thus a blessed thought that none of them would be connected with the seminary, for even the French professor, though admittedly a papist, he could scarce imagine frequenting so rakish an establishment. "Oh, no," said Pittman. "Surely not. No more to drink." "I don't know what you would be at," said Michael plaintively. "It's positively necessary to do something, and one shouldn't smoke before meals." "I thought that was understood. You seem to have no idea of hygiene." And he compared his watch with the clock upon the chimney-piece. Pittman fell into bitter musing. Here he was, ridiculously shorn, absurdly disguised, in the company of a drunken man in spectacles, and waiting for a champagne luncheon in a restaurant painfully foreign. What would his principals think? If they could see him, what if they knew his tragic and deceitful errand? From these reflections, he was aroused by the entrance of the alien with the brandies and sodas. Michael took one, and bade the waiter pass the other to his friend. Pittman waved it from him with his hand. "Don't let me lose all self-respect," he said. "Mister Gidden Borsey," replied the waiter, and he tossed off the liquor in 4 gulps. "Have another?" said Michael, with undisguised interest. "I never saw a man drink faster. It restores one's confidence in the human race." But the waiter excused himself politely, and, assisted by someone from without, began to bring in lunch. On the production of coffee and departure of the waiter, Michael might have been observed to make portentous efforts after gravity of mien. He looked his friend in the face, one eye perhaps a trifle off, and addressed him thickly, but severely. "Enough of this fooling," was his not inappropriate exordium. "To business. Mark me closely. I am an Australian. My name is John Dixon, though you mightn't think it from my unassuming appearance. You will be relieved to hear that I am rich. Sir, very rich. You can't go into this sort of thing too thoroughly, Pittman. The whole secret is preparation, and I can get up my biography from the beginning, and I could tell it you now. Only I have forgotten it." "Perhaps I'm stupid," began Pittman. "That's it," cried Michael. "Very stupid, but rich too, richer than I am. I thought you would enjoy it, Pittman, so I've arranged that you were to be literally wallowing in wealth. But then, on the other hand, you're only an American and a maker of India rubber overshows at that. And the worst of it is, why should I conceal it from you? The worst of it is that you're called Ezra Thomas." "Now," said Michael, with a really appalling seriousness of manner, "tell me who we are." The unfortunate little man was cross-examined till he knew these facts by heart. "There," cried the lawyer, "our plans are laid. Thoroughly consistent, that's the great thing." "Oh, you'll understand right enough when it comes to the point," said Michael, rising. "There doesn't seem any story to it," said the artist. "We can invent one as we go along," returned the lawyer. "But I can't invent," protested Pittman. "I never could invent in all my life." "You'll find you'll have to, my boy," was Michael's easy comment, and he began calling for the waiter, with whom he at once resumed a sparkling conversation. It was a downcast little man that followed him. Of course he is very clever, but can I trust him in such a state? He asked himself. And when they were once more in a hansom, he took heart of grace. "Don't you think," he faltered, "it would be wiser, considering all things, to put this business off?" "Put off till tomorrow what can be done today?" cried Michael with indignation. "Never heard of such a thing. Cheer up, it's all right. Go in and win. There's a lion-hearted pitman. At Cannon Street, they inquired for Mr. Brown's piano, which had duly arrived, drove thence to a neighboring mews, where they contracted for a cart, and while that was being got ready, took shelter in the harness room beside the stove. Here the lawyer presently toppled against a wall and fell into a gentle slumber, so that Pittman found himself launched on his own resources in the midst of several staring loafers, such as loved to spend unprofitable days about a stable. Rough day, sir, observed one. Do you go far? Yes, it's rather a rough day, said the artist, and then, feeling that he must change the conversation, my friend is an Australian. He is very impulsive, he added. An Australian? Said another. I've a brother myself in Melbourne. Does your friend come from that way at all? No, not exactly, replied the artist, whose ideas of the geography of New Holland were a little scattered. He lives immensely far inland and is very rich. The loafers gaze with great respect upon the slumbering colonist. Well, remarked the second speaker, it's a mighty big place, is Australia. Do you come from there away too? No, I do not, said Pittman. I do not, and I don't want to, he added irritably. And then, feeling some diversion needful, he fell upon Michael and shook him up. Hello, said the lawyer. What's wrong? The cart is nearly ready, said Pittman sternly. I will not allow you to sleep. All right, no offense, old man, replied Michael, yawning. A little sleep never did anybody any harm. I feel comparatively sober now. But what's all the hurry? He added, looking round him glassily. I don't see the cart, and I've forgotten where we left the piano. What more the lawyer might have said in the confidence of the moment is with Pittman a matter of tremulous conjecture to this day. But by the most blessed circumstance the cart was then announced, and Michael must bend the forces of his mind to a more difficult task of rising. Of course you'll drive, he remarked to his companion, as he clambered on the vehicle. I drive, cried Pittman. I never did such a thing in my life. I cannot drive. Very well, responded Michael with entire composure. Neither can I see, but just as you like. Anything to oblige a friend. A glimpse of the ostler's darkening countenance decided Pittman. All right, he said desperately. You drive? I'll tell you where to go. On Michael in the character of charioteer, since this is not intended to be a novel of adventure, it would be superfluous to dwell at length. Pittman, as he sat holding on and gasping counsels, sole witness of the singular feat, knew not whether most to admire the driver's valor or his undeserved good fortune. But the latter at least prevailed. The cart reached Cannon Street without disaster, and Mr. Brown's piano was speedily and cleverly got on board. Well, sir, said the leading porter, smiling as he mentally reckoned up a handful of loose silver, that's a mortal heavy piano. It's the richness of the tone, returned Michael, as he drove away. It was but a little distance in the rain, which now fell thick and quiet, to the neighborhood of Mr. Gideon Forsyth's chambers in the Temple. There, in a deserted by-street, Michael drew up the horses and gave them in charge to a blighted shoeblack, and the pair descending from the cart, whereon they had figured so incongruously, set forth on foot for the decisive scene of their adventure. For the first time Michael displayed a shadow of uneasiness. Are my whiskers right? He asked. It would be the devil and all if I was spotted. They are perfectly in their place, returned Pittman, with scant attention. But is my disguise equally effective? There is nothing more likely than that I should meet some of my patrons. Oh, nobody could tell you without your beard, said Michael. All you have to do is to remember to speak slow. You speak through your nose already. I only hope the young man won't be at home, sighed Pittman. And I only hope he'll be alone, returned the lawyer. It will save a precious sight of maneuvering. And sure enough, when they had knocked at the door, Gideon admitted them in person to a room, warmed by a moderate fire, framed nearly to the roof in works connected with a bench of British Themis, and offering, except in one particular, eloquent testimony to the legal zeal of proprietor. The one particular was a chimney piece, which displayed a varied assortment of pipes, tobacco, cigar boxes, and yellow-backed French novels. Mr. Forsyth, I believe it was Michael who thus opened the engagement. We have come to trouble you with a piece of business. I fear it's scarcely professional. I am afraid I ought to be instructed through a solicitor, replied Gideon. Well, You shall name your own, and the whole affair can be put on a more regular footing tomorrow, replied Michael, taking a chair and motioning Pittman to do the same. But you see, we didn't know any solicitors. We did happen to know of you, and time presses. May I inquire, gentlemen, asked Gideon, to whom was I indebted for a recommendation? You may inquire, returned the lawyer with a foolish laugh, but I was invited not to tell you till the thing was done. My uncle, no doubt, was the barrister's conclusion. My name is John Dixon, continued Michael, a pretty well-known name in Ballarat, and my friend here is Mr. Ezra Thomas, of the United States of America, a wealthy manufacturer of India rubber overshoes. Stop one moment till I make a note of that, said Gideon. Anyone might have supposed he was an old practitioner. Perhaps you wouldn't mind my smoking a cigar? Asked Michael. He had pulled himself together for the entrance. Now again there began to settle on his mind clouds of irresponsible humor and incipient slumber, and he hoped, as so many have hoped in the like case, that a cigar would clear him. Oh, certainly, cried Gideon blandly. Try one of mine. I can confidently recommend them. And he handed the box to his client. In case I don't make myself perfectly clear, observed the Australian, it's perhaps best to tell you candidly that I've been lunching. It's a thing that may happen to anyone. Oh, certainly, replied the affable barrister, but please be under no sense of hurry. I can give you, he added, thoughtfully consulting his watch. Yes, I can give you the whole afternoon. The business that brings me here, resumed the Australian with gusto, is devilish delicate. I can tell you, my friend Mr. Thomas, being an American of Portuguese extraction, unacquainted with our habits, and a wealthy manufacturer of Broadwood pianos. Broadwood pianos? Cried Gideon with some surprise. Dear me, do I understand Mr. Thomas to be a member of the firm? Oh, pirated Broadwoods, returned Michael. My friend's the American Broadwood. But I understood you to say, objected Gideon. I certainly have it so in my notes that your friend was a manufacturer of India rubber overshoes. The barrister looked at Mr. Thomas and was agreeably prepossessed by his open, although nervous countenance, and the simplicity and timidity of his manner. What a people are these Americans, he thought. Look at this nervous, weedy, simple little bird in a low-neck shirt, and think of him wielding and directing interests so extended and seemingly incongruous. But had we not better, he observed aloud, had we not perhaps better approached the facts? Man of business, I perceive, sir, said the Australian. Let's approach the facts. It's a breach of promise case. The unhappy artist was so unprepared for this view of his position that he could scarce suppress a cry. Dear me, said Gideon, they are apt to be very troublesome. Tell me everything about it, he added kindly. If you require my assistance, conceal nothing. You tell him, said Michael, feeling apparently that he had done his share. My friend will tell you all about it, he added to Gideon with a yawn. Excuse my closing my eyes a moment. I've been sitting up with a sick friend. Pittman gazed blankly about the room. Rage and despair seethed in his innocent spirit. Thoughts of flight, thoughts even of suicide, came and went before him, and still the barrister patiently waited, and still the artist groped in vain for any form of words, however insignificant. It's a breach of promise case, he said at last in a low voice. I am threatened with a breach of promise case. Here, in desperate quest of inspiration, he made a clutch at his beard. His fingers closed upon the unfamiliar smoothness of a shaven chin, and with that hope and courage, if such expressions could ever have been appropriate in the case of Pittman, conjointly fled. He shook Michael roughly. Wake up, he cried, with genuine irritation in his tones. I cannot do it, and you know I can't. You must excuse my friend, said Michael. He's no hand as a narrator of stirring incident. The case is simple, he went on. My friend is a man of very strong passions and accustomed to a simple, patriarchal style of life. You see the thing from here. Unfortunate visit to Europe, followed by unfortunate acquaintance with sham foreign count, who has a lovely daughter. Mr. Thomas was quite carried away. He proposed, he was accepted, and he wrote in a style which I am sure he must regret today, if these letters are produced in court. Sir, Mr. Thomas's character is gone. Am I to understand, began Gideon. My dear sir, said the Australian emphatically. "It isn't possible to understand unless you saw them." "That is a painful circumstance," said Gideon. He glanced pityingly in the direction of the culprit, and, observing on his countenance every mark of confusion, pityingly withdrew his eyes. "A contraction in current use," said Michael. "GA, for Georgia, in the same way as company for company." "I was aware it was sometimes so written," returned the barrister, "but not that it was so pronounced." "Fact, I assure you," said Michael. "You now see for yourself, sir, that if this unhappy person is to be saved, some devilish sharp practice will be needed. There's money and no desire to spare it. Mr. Thomas could write a check tomorrow for 100,000. And Mr. Forsyth, there's better than money. The foreign Count Tarno, he calls himself, was formerly a tobacconist in Bayswater and passed under the humble but expressive name of Schmidt. His daughter, if she is his daughter, there's another point. Make a note of that, Mr. Forsyth. His daughter at that time actually served in the shop, and she now proposes to marry a man of the eminence of Mr. Thomas. Now do you see our game?" "There seem some elements of success," said Gideon. "Was Schmidt at all known to the police?" "We hope so," said Michael. "We have every ground to think so. Mark the neighborhood. Bayswater. Doesn't Bayswater occur to you as very suggestive?" For perhaps the sixth time during this remarkable interview, Gideon wondered if he were not becoming lightheaded. "I suppose it's just because he has been lunching," he thought, and then added aloud, "To what figure may I go?" "Perhaps 5,000 would be enough for today," said Michael. "And now, sir, do not let me detain you any longer. The afternoon wears on. There are plenty of trains at Hampton Court, and I needn't try to describe to you the impatience of my friend. Here is a £5 note for current expenses, and here's the address." And Michael began to write, paused, tore up the paper, and put the pieces in his pocket. "I will dictate," he said. "My writing is so uncertain." Gideon took down the address. Count Tarno, Colonel Villa, Hampton Court. Then he wrote something else on a sheet of paper. "You said you had not chosen a solicitor," he said, "for a case of this sort. Here is the best man in London." And he handed the paper to Michael. "God bless me!" ejaculated Michael as he read his own address. "Oh, I dare say you have seen his name connected with some rather painful cases," said Gideon. "But he is himself a perfectly honest man, and his capacity is recognized. And now, gentlemen, it only remains for me to ask where I shall communicate with you." "The Langham, of course," returned Michael. "Till tonight." "Till tonight," replied Gideon, smiling. "I suppose I may knock you up at a late hour?" Any hour," cried the vanishing solicitor. "Now, there's a young fellow with a head upon his shoulders," he said to Pittman, as soon as they were in the street. Pittman was indistinctly heard to murmur, "Perfect fool." "Not a bit of him," returned Michael. "He knows who's the best solicitor in London, and it's not every man can say the same. But, I say, didn't I pitch in hot?" Pittman returned no answer. "Hello," said the lawyer, pausing. "What's wrong with the long-suffering Pittman?" "You had no right to speak of me as you did," the artist broke out. "Your language was perfectly unjustifiable. You have wounded me deeply." "I never said a word about you," replied Michael. "I spoke of Ezra Thomas, and do please remember that there's no such party." "It's just as hard to bear," said the artist. But by this time they had reached the corner of the by-street, and there was a faithful shoeblack, standing by the horses' heads with a splendid assumption of dignity. And there was a piano, figuring forlorn upon the cart, while the rain beat upon its unprotected sides and trickled down its elegantly varnished legs. The shoeblack was again put in requisition to bring 5 or 6 strong fellows from a neighboring public house, and the last battle of the campaign opened. It is probable that Mr. Gideon Forsyth had not yet taken his seat in the train for Hampton Court before Michael opened the door of the chambers, and the grunting porters deposited the Broadwood Grand in the middle of the floor. "And now," said the lawyer, after he had sent the men about their business, "one more precaution. We must leave him the key of the piano, and we must contrive that he shall find it. Let me see." And he built a square tower of cigars upon the top of the instrument, and dropped the key into the middle. "Poor young man," said the artist as they descended the stairs. "He is in a devil of a position. assented Michael drily. "It'll brace him up. And that reminds me," observed the excellent Pittman, "that I fear I displayed a most ungrateful temper. I had no right, I see, to resent expressions, wounding as they were, which were in no sense directed." "That's all right," cried Michael, getting on the cart. "Not a word more, Pittman. Very proper feeling on your part. No man of self-respect can stand by and hear his alias insulted." The rain had now ceased. Michael was fairly sober. The body had been disposed of, and the friends were reconciled. The return to Mews was therefore, in comparison with previous stages of the day's adventures, quite a holiday outing. And when they had returned the cart and walked forth again from the stable yard unchallenged and even unsuspected, Pittman drew a deep breath of joy. "And now," he said, "we can go home." "Pittman," said the lawyer, stopping short, "your recklessness fills me with concern." "What?" "We have been wet to the greater part of the day, and you propose, in cold blood, to go home." "No, sir, hot scotch." And taking his friend's arm, he led him sternly towards the nearest public house. Nor was Pittman, I regret to say, wholly unwilling. Now that peace was restored and the body gone, a certain innocent skittishness began to appear in the manners of the artist, and when he touched his steaming glass to Michael's, he giggled aloud like a venturesome schoolgirl at a picnic. Chapter 9. Glorious conclusion of Michael Finsbury's holiday. I know Michael Finsbury personally, my business. I know the awkwardness of having such a man for a lawyer. Still an old story now, and there is such a thing as gratitude, and, in short, my legal business, although now, I am thankful to say, of quite a placid character, remains entirely in Michael's hands. But the trouble is I have no natural talent for addresses. I learn one for every man, that is friendship's offering. And the friend who subsequently changes his residence is dead to me, memory refusing to pursue him. Thus it comes about that, as I always write to Michael at his office, I cannot swear to his number in the King's Road. Of course, like my neighbors, I have been to dinner there. Of late years, since his accession to wealth, neglect of business, and election to club, these little festivals have become common. He picks up a few fellows in the smoking room, all men of adequate, myself, for instance, if he has the luck to find me disengaged. A string of hansoms may be observed by Her Majesty, bowling gaily through St. James's Park, and in a quarter of an hour the party surrounds one of the best appointed boards in London. But at the time at which we write, the house in the King's Road, let us still continue to call it number 233, was kept very quiet. When Michael entertained guests, it was at the halls of Nickel or Verray that he would convene them, and the door of his private residence remained closed against his friends. The upper story, which was sunny, was set apart for his father. The drawing-room was never opened. The dining-room was the scene of Michael's life. It is in this pleasant apartment, sheltered from the curiosity of King's Road by wire blinds, and entirely surrounded by the lawyer's unrivaled library of poetry and criminal trials, that we find him sitting down to his dinner after his holiday with Pittman. A spare old lady, with very bright eyes and a mouth humorously compressed, waited upon the lawyer's needs. In every line of her countenance, she betrayed the fact that she was an old retainer. In every word that fell from her lips, she flaunted the glorious circumstance of a Scottish origin. And the fear with which this powerful combination fills the boldest was obviously no stranger to the bosom of our friend. The hot Scotch having somewhat warmed up the embers of the hide-seek, it was touching to observe the master's eagerness to pull himself together under the servant's eye. And when he remarked, "I think, Tina, I'll take a brandy and soda," he spoke like a man doubtful of his elocution and not half certain of obedience. "No such a thing, Mr. Michael," was the prompt return. "Claret and water." Well, Tina, I dare say you know best," said the master. "Very fatiguing day at the office, though." "What?" said the retainer. "Ye never were near the office." "Oh, yes, I was, though. I was repeatedly along Fleet Street," returned Michael. "Pretty pliskies have ye been at this day," cried the old lady with humorous alacrity. And then, "Take care! Don't break my crystal," she cried, as the lawyer came within an ace of knocking the glasses off the table. "And how is he keeping?" asked Michael. "Oh, just the same, Mr. Michael. Just the way he'll be till the end. Worthy man," was the reply. "But ye'll not be the first that's asked me that the day." "No," said the lawyer. "Who else?" "Aye, that's a joke, too," said Tina grimly. "A friend of yours, Mr. Morris." Morris, what was the little beggar wanting here? Inquired Michael. Wantin' to see him, replied the housekeeper, completing her meaning by a movement of the thumb toward the upper story. That's by his way of it. But I've an idea of my own. He tried to bribe me, Mr. Michael. Bribe me? She repeated with inimitable scorn. That's no kind of a young gentleman. Did he so? Said Michael. I bet he didn't offer much. No more he did, replied Tina, nor could any subsequent questioning elicit from her the sum with which the thrifty leather merchant had attempted to corrupt her. But I sent him about his business, she said gallantly. He'll not come here again in a hurry. He mustn't see my father, you know. Mind that, said Michael. I'm not going to have any public exhibition to a little beast like him. No fear of me letting him, replied the trusty one. But the joke is this, Mr. Michael. See, you're upset in the sauce, that a clean tablecloth. The best of the joke is that he thinks your father's dead and you're keeping it dark. Michael whistled. Set a thief to catch a thief, said he. Exactly why what I told him, cried the delighted dame. I'll make him dance for that, said Michael. Couldn't you get the law of him some way? Suggested Tina truculently. No, I don't think I could, and I'm quite sure I don't want to, replied Michael. But I say, Tina, I really don't believe this claret is wholesome. It's not a sound, reliable wine. Give us a brandy and soda. There's a good soul. Tina's face became like adamant. Well then, said the lawyer fretfully, I won't eat any more dinner. Ye can please yourself about that, Mr. Michael, said Tina, and began composedly to take away. I do wish Tina wasn't a faithful servant, sighed the lawyer as he issued into Kings's Road. Near the end of the King's Road, he remembered his brandy and soda and entered a flaunting public house. A good many persons were present, a waterman from a cab stand, half a dozen of the chronically unemployed, a gentleman in one corner, trying to sell aesthetic photographs out of a leather case to another and very youthful gentleman with yellow goatee, and a pair of lovers debating some fine shade in the other. But the centerpiece and great attraction was a little old man in a black, ready-made surtout, which was obviously a recent purchase. On the marble table in front of him, beside a sandwich and a glass of beer, there lay a battered forage cap. His hand fluttered abroad with oratorical gestures. His voice, naturally shrill, was plainly tuned to the pitch of the lecture room, and by arts comparable to those of the ancient mariner. He was now holding spellbound the barmaid, the waterman, and four of the unemployed. I have examined all the theaters in London, he was saying, and pacing the principal entrances, I have ascertained them to be ridiculously disproportionate to the requirements of their audiences. The doors open the wrong way. I forget at this moment which it is, but have a note of it at home. They were frequently locked during performance, and when the auditorium was literally thronged with English people. You have probably not had my opportunities of comparing distant lands, but I can assure you this has been long ago recognized as a mark of aristocratic government. Do you suppose, in a country really self-governed, such abuses could exist? Your own intelligence, however uncultivated, tells you they could not. Take Austria, a country even possibly more enslaved than England. I have myself conversed with one of the survivors of the Ring Theater, and though his colloquial German was not very good, I succeeded in gathering a pretty clear idea of his opinion of the case. But what will perhaps interest you still more, here is a cutting on the subject from a Vienna newspaper, which I will now read to you, translating as I go. You can see for yourselves. It is printed in the German character, and he held the cutting out for verification, much as a conjurer passes a trick orange along the front bench. Hello, old gentleman. Is this you? Said Michael, laying his hand upon the orator's shoulder. The figure turned with a convulsion of alarm and showed the countenance of Mr. Joseph Finsbury. You, Michael, he cried. There's no one with you, is there? No, replied Michael, ordering a brandy and soda. There's nobody with me. Whom do you expect? What the devil would I be doing with Morris or John? Cried the nephew. There is something in that, returned Joseph, and I believe I can trust you. I believe you will stand by me. It's not that, my dear boy, said the uncle, shaking him by the hand. I'll tell you all about it afterwards. All right, responded the nephew. I stand treat, Uncle Joseph. What will you have? "In that case," replied the old gentleman, "I'll take another sandwich. I dare say I surprise you," he went on, "with my presence in public house. But the fact is, I act on a sound but little-known principle of my own." "Oh, it's better known than you suppose," said Michael, sipping his brandy and soda. "I always act on it myself when I want a drink." The old gentleman, who was anxious to propitiate Michael, laughed a cheerless laugh. "You have such a flow of spirits," said he. "I am sure I often find it quite amusing. But regarding this principle of which I was about to speak, it is that of accommodating oneself to manners of any land, however humble, in which our lot may be cast. Now, in France, for instance, everyone goes to a cafe for his meals. In America, to what is called a two-bit house. In England, the people resort to such an institution as the present for refreshment. With sandwiches, tea, and an occasional glass of bitter beer, a man can live luxuriously in London for £14 12 per annum. "Yes, I know," returned Michael, "but that's not including clothes, washing, or boots. The whole thing, with cigars and occasional sprees, cost me over £700 a year." But this was Michael's last interruption. He listened in good-humored silence to the remainder of his uncle's lecture, which speedily branched to political reform, thence to the theory of the weather glass, with an illustrated account of Bora in the Adriatic, thence again to the best manner of teaching arithmetic to the deaf and dumb. And with that, the sandwich being then no more, explicit vol feliciter. A moment later the pair issued forth on the King's Road. "Michael," said his uncle, "the reason that I am here is because I cannot endure those nephews of mine. I find them intolerable." "I dare say you do," assented Michael. "I never could stand them for a moment." "They wouldn't let me speak," continued the old gentleman bitterly. "I never was allowed to get a word in edgewise. I was shut up at once with some impertinent remark. They kept me on short allowance of pencils, when I wished to make notes of the most absorbing interest. The daily newspaper was guarded from me like a young baby from a gorilla. Now, you know me, Michael. I live for my calculations. I live for my manifold and ever-changing views of life. Pens and paper and the productions of the popular press are to me as important as food and drink, and my life was growing quite intolerable when, in the confusion of that fortunate railway accident at Browndean, I made my escape. They must think me dead, and are trying to deceive the world for the chance of the tontine. By the way, how do you stand for money?" asked Michael kindly. "Pecuniarily speaking, I am rich," returned the old man with cheerfulness. "I am living at present at the rate of 100 a year, with unlimited pens and paper, the British Museum at which to get books, and all the newspapers I choose to read. But it's extraordinary how little a man of intellectual interest requires to bother with books in a progressive age. The newspapers supply all the conclusions. I'll tell you what," said Michael. "Come and stay with me." "Michael," said the old gentleman, "it's very kind of you, but you scarcely understand what a peculiar position I occupy. There are some little financial complications. As a guardian, my efforts were not altogether blessed, and not put too fine a point upon the matter, I am absolutely in the power of that vile fellow Morris." "You should be disguised," cried Michael eagerly. "I will lend you a pair of window-glass spectacles and some red side whiskers." "I had already canvassed that idea," replied the old gentleman, "but feared to awaken remark in my unpretentious lodgings. The aristocracy, I am well aware." "But see here," interrupted Michael, "how do you come to have any money at all? Don't make a stranger of me, Uncle Joseph. I know all about the trust and the hash you made of it, and the assignment you were forced to make to Morris." Joseph narrated his dealings with the bank. "Oh, but I say, this won't do," cried the lawyer. "You've put your foot in it. You had no right to do what you did." "The whole thing is mine, Michael," protested the old gentleman. "I founded and nursed that business on principles entirely of my own." "That's all very fine," said the lawyer. "But you made an assignment. You were forced to make it, too. Even then your position was extremely shaky. But now, my dear sir, it means the dock." "It isn't possible," cried Joseph. "The law cannot be so unjust as that." "And the cream of the thing," interrupted Michael, with a sudden shout of laughter, "the cream of the thing is this, that of course you've downed the leather business. I must say, Uncle Joseph, you have strange ideas of law, but I like your taste and humor." I see nothing to laugh at, observed Mr. Finsbury tartly. And talking of that, has Morris any power to sign for firm? Asked Michael. No one but myself, replied Joseph. Poor devil of a Morris. Oh, poor devil of a Morris, cried the lawyer in delight, and is keeping up the farce that you're at home. Oh, Morris, the Lord has delivered you into my hands. Let me see, Uncle Joseph, what do you suppose the leather business worth? It was worth 100,000, said Joseph bitterly, when it was in my hands. But then there came a Scotsman. It is supposed he had a certain talent. It was entirely directed to bookkeeping. No accountant in London could understand a word of any of his books. And then there was Morris, who is perfectly incompetent, and now it is worth very little. Morris tried to sell it last year, and Pogram and Jerry's offered only 4,000. I shall turn my attention to leather, said Michael with decision. You, asked Joseph. I advise you not. There is nothing in the whole field of commerce more surprising than the fluctuations of the leather market. Its sensitiveness may be described as morbid. And now, Uncle Joseph, what have you done with all that money? Asked the lawyer. Paid it into a bank and drew 20 pounds, answered Mr. Finsbury promptly. Why? Very well, said Michael. Tomorrow I shall send down a clerk with a check for 100, and he'll draw out the original sum and return it to the Anglo-Patagonian, with some sort of explanation which I will try to invent for you, that will clear your feet, and as Morris can't touch a penny of it without forgery, it will do no harm to my little scheme. But what am I to do? Asked Joseph. I cannot live upon nothing. Don't you hear? Returned Michael. I send you a check for 100, which leave you 80 to go along upon, and when that's done, apply to me again. I would rather not be beholden to your bounty all the same, said Joseph, biting at his white mustache. I would rather live on my own money, since I have it. Michael grasped his arm. Will nothing make you believe, he cried, that I am trying to save you from Dartmoor? His earnestness staggered the old man. I must turn my attention to law, he said. It will be a new field, for though, of course, I understand its general principles, I have never really applied my mind to the details, and this view of yours, for example, comes on me entirely by surprise. But you may be right, and of course at my time of life, for I am no longer young, any really long term of imprisonment would be highly prejudicial. But, my dear nephew, I have no claim on you. You have no call to support me. And having taken down the old gentleman's address, Michael left him at the corner of a street. What a wonderful old muddler, he reflected, and what a singular thing is life. I seem to be condemned to be the instrument of Providence. Let me see, what have I done today? Dispose of a dead body, save Pittman, save my Uncle Joseph, brighten up Forsyth, and drunk a devil a lot of most indifferent liquor. Let's top off a visit to my cousins, and be the instrument of Providence in earnest. Tomorrow I can turn my attention to leather. Tonight I'll just make it lively for him in a friendly spirit. About a quarter of an hour later, as the clocks were striking 11, the instrument of Providence descended from a hansom and, bidding the driver wait, rapped at the door of number 16 John Street. It was promptly opened by Morris. Oh, it's you, Michael, he said, carefully blocking up the narrow opening. It's very late. Michael, without a word, reached forth, grasped Morris warmly by the hand, and gave it so extreme a squeeze that the sullen householder fell back. Profiting by this movement, the lawyer obtained a footing in the lobby and marched into the dining room, with Morris at his heels. Where's my Uncle Joseph? Demanded Michael, sitting down in the most comfortable chair. He's not been very well lately, replied Morris. He's staying at Browndean. John is nursing him, and I am alone, as you see. Michael smiled to himself. I want to see him on particular business, he said. You can't expect to see my uncle when you won't let me see your father, returned Morris. Fiddlestick, said Michael. My father is my father, but Joseph is just as much my uncle as he's yours, and you have no right to sequestrate his person. I do no such thing, said Morris doggedly. He is not well. He is dangerously ill, and nobody can see him. I'll tell you what, then, said Michael. I'll make a clean breast of it. I have come down like the opossum, Morris. I have come to compromise. Poor Morris turned as pale as death, and then a flush of wrath against the injustice of man's destiny dyed his very temples. "What do you mean?" he cried. "I don't believe a word of it." And when Michael had assured him of his seriousness, "Well then," he cried with another deep flush, "I won't. So you can put that in your pipe and smoke it." "What do you mean?" cried Morris hoarsely. "I only say it's fishy," returned Michael. "That is, pertaining to the Finny tribe." "Insinuate," repeated Michael. "Oh, don't let's begin to use awkward expressions. Let us drown our differences in a bottle, like two affable kinsmen. The two affable kinsmen, sometimes attributed to Shakespeare," he added. Morse's mind was laboring like a mill. Does he suspect? Or is this chance and stuff? Should I soap or should I bully? Soap, he concluded. It gains time. "Well," said he aloud, and with rather a painful affectation of heartiness, "it's long since we have had an evening together, Michael, and though my habits, as you know, are very temperate, I may as well make an exception. Excuse me one moment till I fetch a bottle of whiskey from the cellar." For a moment Morris stood irresolute, for the wine was very valuable. The next he quitted the room without a word. His quick mind had perceived his advantage. In thus dunning him for the cream of the cellar, Michael was playing into his hand. "One bottle," he thought. "By George, I'll give him two. This is no moment for economy. And once the beast is drunk, it's strange if I don't wring his secret out of him." With two bottles, accordingly, he returned. Glasses were produced, and Morris filled them with hospitable grace. "I drink to you, cousin," he cried gaily. "Don't spare the wine cup in my house." Michael drank his glass deliberately, standing at the table, filled it again, and returned to his chair, carrying the bottle along with him. "What makes you think me deep?" asked Morris with an air of pleased simplicity. "Because you won't compromise," said the lawyer. "You're deep dog, Morris. Very deep dog. Not tea compromise. Remarkable deep dog. And a very good glass of wine. It's the only respectable feature in the Finsbury family. This wine. Rarer thing than a title, much rarer. Now a man with glass wine like this in cellar. I wonder why I won't compromise." "Well, you wouldn't compromise before you know," said the smiling Morris. "Turnabout is fair play. I wonder why I wouldn't compromise." "I wonder why you wouldn't?" inquired Michael. "I wonder why we each think the other wouldn't. Es quite a remarkable problem," he added, triumphing over oral obstacles, not without obvious pride. "Wonder what we each think, don't you?" "What do you suppose would have been my reason?" asked Morris adroitly. Michael looked at him and winked. "That's cool," said he. "Next thing, you'll ask me to help you out of the muddle. I know I'm emissary of Providence, but not that kind. You get out of it yourself, like Aesop and the other fellow. Must be dreadful muddle for young orphan o' 40, leather business and all." "I am sure I don't know what you mean," said Morris. "Not sure I know myself," said Michael. "This is excellent vintage, sir, excellent vintage. Nothing against the tipple. Only thing, here's a valuable uncle disappeared. Now, what I want to know, where's valuable uncle? I have told you. He is at Browndean," answered Morris, furtively wiping his brow, for these repeated hints began to tell upon him cruelly. "Very easy say Brown. Brownie. No, so easy after all," cried Michael. "Easy say. Anything's easy say when you can say it. What I done likes total disappearance of an uncle, not businesslike." And he wagged his head. "It is all perfectly simple," returned Morris with laborious calm. "There is no mystery. He stays at Browndean, where he got a shake in the accident." "Why do you say that?" cried Morris sharply. "Best possible authority." "Told me so yourself," said the lawyer. "But if you tell me contrary now, of course I'm bound to believe either the one story or the other. Point is I've upset this bottle. Still champagne's the excellent thing carpet. Point is valuable Uncle dead and buried?" Morris sprang from his seat. "What's it you say?" he gasped. "I say it's excellent thing carpet," replied Michael, rising. "Excellent thing promote healthy action of the skin. Well, it's all one, anyway. Give my love to Uncle Champagne." "You're not going away?" said Morris. "AWFLY sorry. Oh, man. "Gotta sit up, sick friend," said the wavering Michael. "You shall not go till you have explained your hints," returned Morris fiercely. "What do you mean? What brought you here?" "No offense, I trust," said the lawyer, turning round as he opened the door. "Only doing my duty as chemistry of Providence." Groping his way to the front door, he opened it with some difficulty and descended the steps to the hansom. The tired driver looked up as he approached and asked where he was to go next. Michael observed that Morris had followed him to the steps. A brilliant inspiration came to him. "Anything to give pain," he reflected. "Drive Scotland Yard," he added aloud, holding the wheel to steady himself. "There's something devilish fishy, cabby, about those cousins. Must be cleared up. Drive Scotland Yard." "Is it as friend or a professional man you advise me not to go Scotland Yard tonight?" inquired Michael. "All right. Never mind Scotland Yard. Drive Gaiety Bar." "The Gaiety Bar is closed," said the man. "Then home," said Michael with the same cheerfulness. "Where to, sir?" "But you'll have a card," said the man through the little aperture in the top. "Give me your card case." "What a magi imagination in a cabby," cried the lawyer, producing his card case and handing it to the driver. "Right you are," cried Michael. "Drive there if you can see way." Chapter 10, Gideon Forsyth and the Broadwood Grand. The reader has perhaps read that remarkable work, Who Put Back the Clock, by E.H.B., which appeared for several days upon the railway bookstalls and then vanished entirely from the face of the earth. Whether eating time makes the chief of his diet out of old editions, whether Providence has passed a special enactment on behalf of authors, or whether these last have taken the law into their own hand, bound themselves into a dark conspiracy with a password, which I would die rather than reveal, and night after night sally forth under some vigorous leader, such as Mr. James Paine or Mr. Walter Besant, on their task of secret spoliation. Certain it is, at least, that the old editions pass, giving place to new, to the proof. It is believed there are now only 3 copies extant of Who Put Back the Clock, one in the British Museum, successfully concealed by a wrong entry in the catalogue, another in one of the cellar where the music accumulates, of the Advocates' Library at Edinburgh, and a third, bound in Morocco, in the possession of Gideon Forsyth. To account for the very different fate attending this third exemplar, the readiest theory is to suppose that Gideon admired the tale. How to explain that admiration might appear, to those who peruse the work, more difficult, but the weakness of a parent is extreme, and Gideon, and not his uncle, whose initials he had humorously borrowed, was the author of Who Put Back the Clock. He had never acknowledged it, or only to some intimate friends while it was still in proof, after its appearance an alarming failure. The modesty of the novelist had become more pressing, and the secret was now likely to be better kept than that of the authorship of Waverley. A copy of the work, for the date of my tale is already yesterday, still figured in dusty solitude in the bookstall at Waterloo, and Gideon, as he passed with his ticket for Hampton Court, smiled contemptuously at the creature of his thoughts. What an idle ambition was the author's! How far beneath him was the practice of that childish art! With his hand closing on his first brief, he felt himself a man at last, and the muse who presides over the police romance, a lady presumably of French extraction, fled his neighborhood, and returned to join the dance round the springs of Helicon among her Grecian sisters. Robust, practical reflection still cheered the young barrister upon his journey. Again and again he selected the little country house in its islet of great oaks, which he was to make his future home. Like a prudent householder, he projected improvements as he passed. To one he added a stable, to another a tennis court, a third he supplied with becoming rustic boathouse. The intelligent reader will perceive the ravages of Miss Hazeltine. Gideon had carried Julia straight to Mr. Bloomfield's house, and that gentleman, having been led to understand she was a victim of oppression, had noisily espoused her cause. He worked himself into a fine breathing heat, in which, to a man of his temperament, action became needful, and he sought and instantly found a fresh outlet for his alacrity. Miss Hazeltine, he now perceived, must be kept out of the way. His houseboat was lying ready. He had returned but a day or two before from his usual cruise. There was no place like a houseboat for concealment, And that very morning, in the teeth of the easterly gale, Mr. and Mrs. Bloomfield and Miss Julia Hazeltine had started forth on their untimely voyage. Gideon pled in vain to be allowed to join the party. "No, Gid," said his uncle. "You will be watched. You must keep away from us." Nor had the barrister ventured to contest this strange illusion, for he feared if he rubbed off any of the romance, that Mr. Bloomfield might weary of the whole affair, and his discretion was rewarded. For the squirradical, laying a heavy hand upon his nephew's shoulder, had added these notable expressions. "I see what you are after, Gid, but if you're going to get the girl, you have to work, sir." I do not suppose that Gideon will ever forget the Langham Hotel. No Count Tarnow was one thing, no John Dixon, and no Ezra Thomas quite another. How, why, and what next danced in his bewildered brain. From every center what we playfully call the human intellect, incongruous messages were telegraphed, and before the hubbub of dismay had quite subsided, the barrister found himself driving furiously for his chambers. There was at least a cave of refuge. It was at least a place to think in. And he climbed the stair, put his key in the lock, and opened the door with some approach to hope. It was all dark within, for the night had some time fallen. But Gideon knew his room. He knew where the matches stood on the end of the chimney-piece, and he advanced boldly, and so, doing, dash himself against a heavy body, where, slightly altering the expressions of the song, no heavy body should have been. There had been nothing there when Gideon went out. He had locked the door behind him. He had found it locked on his return. No one could have entered. The furniture could not have changed its own position. And yet, undeniably, there was something there. He thrust out his hands in the darkness. Yes, there was something large, something smooth, something cold. And the next moment, he remembered the vestas in his waistcoat pocket, and had struck a light. It was indeed a piano that met his doubtful gaze, a vast and costly instrument, stained with the rains of the afternoon, and defaced with recent scratches. The light of the Vesta was reflected from the varnished sides, like a star in quiet water, and in the farther end of the room the shadow of that strange visitor loomed bulkily and wavered on the wall. Gideon let the match burn to his fingers, and the darkness closed once more on his bewilderment. Then with trembling hands he lit the lamp and drew near. Near or far, there was no doubt of the fact. The thing was a piano. There, where by all the laws of God and man it was impossible that it should be, there the thing impudently stood. Gideon threw open the keyboard and struck a chord. Not a sound disturbed the quiet of the room. "Is there anything wrong with me?" he thought with a pang, and drawing a seat, obstinately persisted in his attempts to ravish silence. Now with sparkling arpeggios, now with sonata Beethoven's, which in happier days he knew to be one of the loudest pieces of that powerful composer. Still not a sound. He gave the broadwood 2 great bangs with his clenched fist. All was still as the grave. The young barrister started to his feet. "I am stark staring mad," he cried aloud, "and no one knows it but myself. God's worst curse has fallen on me." His fingers encountered his watch chain. Instantly he had plucked forth his watch and held it to his ear. He could hear it ticking. "I am not deaf," he said aloud. "I am only insane. My mind has quitted me forever." He looked uneasily about the room, and gazed with lackluster eyes at the chair in which Mr. Dixon had installed himself. The end of the cigar lay near on the fender. He wondered with morbid interest, as he descended the stairs, how he would first betray his terrible condition. Would he attack a waiter? Or eat glass? And when it mounted into a cab, he bade the man drive to Nichols, with a lurking fear that there was no such place. The flaring, gassy entrance of the cafe speedily set his mind at rest. He was cheered beside to recognize his favorite waiter. His orders appeared to be coherent. The dinner, when it came, was quite a sensible meal, and he ate it with enjoyment. "Upon my word," he reflected, "I am about tempted to indulge a hope. Have I been hasty? Have I done what Robert Skill would have done?" Robert Skill, I need scarcely mention, was the name of the principal character in Who Put Back the Clock? It had occurred to the author as a brilliant, improbable invention. The reader's a critical turn. Robert appeared scarce upon a level with his surname. But it is the difficulty of the police romance, that the reader is always a man of such vastly greater ingenuity than the writer. In the eyes of his creator, however, Robert Skill was a word to conjure with, The thought braced and spurred him. What that brilliant creature had done, Gideon would do also. This frame of mind is not uncommon. The distressed general, the beta divine, the hesitating author, decides severally to do what Napoleon, what St. Paul, what Shakespeare would have done. And there remains only the minor question, what is that? In Gideon's case, one thing was clear. Skill was a man of singular decision. He would have taken some step, whatever it was, at once. And the only step that Gideon could think of was to return to his chambers. This being achieved, all further inspiration failed him, and he stood pitifully staring at the instrument of his confusion. To touch the keys again was more than he durst venture on. Whether they had maintained their former silence, or responded with the tones of the last trump, it would have equally dethroned his resolution. It may be a practical jest, he reflected, though it seems elaborate and costly. And yet, what else can it be? It must be a practical jest. And just then as I fell upon a feature which seemed corroborative of that view, the pagoda cigars which Michael had erected ere he left the chambers. Why that, reflected Gideon. It seems entirely irresponsible. And drawing near, he gingerly demolished it. A key, he thought. Why that? And why so conspicuously placed? He made the circuit of the instrument and perceived the keyhole at the back. Aha, this is what the key is for, said. They wanted me to look inside. Stranger and stranger. And with that, he turned the key and raised the lid. In what antics of agony, in what fits of flighty resolution, in what collapses of despair, Gideon consumed the night. It would be ungenerous to inquire too closely. That trill of tiny song with which the eaves birds of London welcome the approach of day found him limp and rumpled and bloodshot, and with a mind still vacant of resource. He rose and looked forth unrejoicingly on blinded windows, an empty street, and the gray daylight dotted with the yellow lamps. There are mornings when the city seems to awake with a sick headache. This was one of them, and still the twittering reveille of the sparrows stirred in Gideon's spirit. Day here, he thought, and I still helpless. This must come to an end. And he locked up the piano, put the key in his pocket, and set forth in quest of coffee. As he went, his mind trudged for the 100th time a certain mill road of terrors, misgivings, and regrets. To call in the police, to give up the body, to cover London with handbills describing John Dixon and Ezra Thomas, to fill the papers with paragraphs, mysterious occurrence in the Temple. Mr. Forsyth admitted a bail. This was one course, an easy course, a safe course, but not, the more he reflected on it, not a pleasant one. For was it not to publish abroad a number of singular facts about himself? A child ought to have seen through the story of these adventurers, and he had gaped and swallowed it. A barrister of the least self-respect should have refused to listen to clients who came before him in a manner so irregular, and he had listened. And, oh, if he had only listened! But he had gone upon their errand, he, a barrister, uninstructed even by the shadow of solicitor, upon an errand fit only for a private detective, and alas! And for the 100th time the blood surged his brow, he had taken their money. No, said he, the thing is as plain as St. Paul's. I shall be dishonored. I have smashed my career for a £5 note. Between the possibility of being hanged in all innocence and the certainty of a public and merited disgrace, no gentleman of spirit could long hesitate. After 3 gulps of that hot, snuffy, and muddy beverage that passes on the streets of London for a decoction of the coffee berry, Gideon's mind was made up. He would do without the police. He must face the other side of the dilemma and be Robert Skill in earnest. What would Robert Skill have done? How does a gentleman dispose of a dead body, honestly come by? He remembered the inimitable story of the hunchback, reviewed its course, and dismissed it for a worthless guide. It was impossible to prop a corpse on the corner of Tottenham Court Road without arousing fatal curiosity in the bosoms of the passers-by. As for lowering it down a London chimney, the physical obstacles were insurmountable. To get on board a train and drop it out, or on the top of an omnibus and drop it off, were equally out of the question. To get on a yacht and drop it overboard was more conceivable, but for a man of moderate means it seemed extravagant. The hire of the yacht was in itself a consideration. The subsequent support of the whole crew, which seemed a necessary consequence, was simply not to be thought of. His uncle in the houseboat here occurred in very luminous colors to his mind. A musical composer, say of a name of Jimson, might very well suffer, like Hogarth's musician before him, from the disturbances of London. He might very well be pressed for time to finish an opera, say the comic opera Orange Pico. Orange Pico, music by Jimson, this young maestro, one of the most promising of our recent English school, vigorous entrance of the drums, etc. The whole character of Jimson and his music arose in bulk before the mind of Gideon. What more likely than Jimson's arrival with a grand piano, say at Padwick, and his residence in a houseboat alone with the unfinished score of Orange Pico. His subsequent disappearance, leaving nothing behind but an empty piano case, it might be more difficult to account for. And yet, even that was susceptible of explanation. For, suppose Jimson had gone mad over a fugal passage, and had thereupon destroyed the accomplice of his infamy, and plunged into the welcome river? What and, on the whole, more probable for a modern musician? By Jove, I'll do it, cried Gideon. Jimson is the boy. Chapter 11. The Maestro Jimson. Mr. Edward Hugh Bloomfield, having announced his intention to stay in the neighborhood of Maidenhead. What more probable than that the Maestro Jimson should turn his mind toward Padwick? Near this pleasant riverside village, he remembered to have observed an ancient, weedy houseboat lying moored beside a tuft of willows. It had stirred in him, in his careless hours, as he pulled down the river under a more familiar name, a certain sense of the romantic. And when the nice contrivance of his story was already complete in his mind, he had come near pulling it all down again, like an ungrateful clock, in order to introduce a chapter in which Richard Skill, who was always being decoyed somewhere, should be decoyed on board that lonely hulk by Lord Bellew and the American desperado Gin Sling. It was fortunate he had not done so, he reflected, since the hulk was now required for very different purposes. Jimson, a man of inconspicuous costume but insinuating manners, had little difficulty in finding the hireling who had charge of the houseboat, and still less in persuading him to resign his care. The rent was almost nominal, the entry immediate, the key was exchanged against a suitable advance in money, and Jimson returned to town by the afternoon train to see about dispatching his piano. "I will be down tomorrow," he had said reassuringly. "My opera is waited for with such impatience, you know." And, sure enough, about the hour at noon on the following day, Jimson might have been observed ascending the riverside road that goes from Padwick to Great Havering, carrying in one hand a basket of provisions, and under the other arm a leather case containing, it is to be conjectured, the score of Orange Pico. It was October weather. The stone-gray sky was full of larks, the leaden mirror of the Thames brightened with autumnal foliage, and the fallen leaves of the chestnuts chirped under the composer's footing. There is no time of the year in England more courageous, and Jimson, though he was not without his troubles, whistled as he went. A little above Padwick the river lies very solitary. On the opposite shore the trees of a private park enclose the view, the chimneys of the mansion just pricking forth above their clusters. On the near side the path is bordered by willows. Close among these lay the houseboat, a thing so soiled by the tears of the overhanging willows, so grown upon with parasites, so decayed, so battered, so neglected, such a haunt of rats, so advertised a storehouse of rheumatic agonies, that the heart of an intending occupant might well recoil. A plank, by way of flying drawbridge, joined it to the shore. It was a dreary moment for Jimson when he pulled this after him, and found himself alone on this unwholesome fortress. He could hear the rats scuttle and flop in the abhorred interior. The key cried among the wards like a thing in pain. The sitting-room was deep in dust, and smelt strong of bilge water. It could not be called a cheerful spot, even for a composer absorbed in beloved toil. How much less for a young gentleman haunted by alarms and awaiting the arrival of a corpse? He sat down, cleared away a piece of the table, and attacked the cold luncheon in his basket. In case of any subsequent inquiry into the fate of Jimson, it was desirable he should be little seen. In other words, that he should spend the day entirely in the house. To this end, and further to corroborate his fable, he had brought in the leather case not only writing materials, but a ream of large-sized music paper, such as he considered suitable for an ambitious character like Jimson's. "And now to work," said he, when he had satisfied his appetite. "We must leave traces of the wretched man's activity." And he wrote in bold characters. "I suppose they never do begin like this," reflected Gideon. "But then it's quite out of the question for me to tackle a full score, and Jimson was so unconventional. A dedication would be found convincing, I believe, dedicated to, let me see, to William Ewart Gladstone, by his obedient servant the composer. And now some music. I had better avoid the overture. It seems to present difficulties. Let's give an air for the tenor. Key. Oh, something modern. 7 sharps. And he made a businesslike signature across the staves, and then paused and browsed for a while on the handle of his pen. Melody, with no better inspiration than a sheet of paper, is not usually found to spring unbidden in the mind of the amateur, nor is the key of 7 sharps a place of much repose to the untried. He cast away that sheet. It will help to build up the character of Jimson, Gideon remarked, and again waited on the muse, in various keys and on divers sheets of paper, but all with results so inconsiderable that he stood aghast. It's very odd, thought he. I seem to have less fancy than I thought, or this is an off day with me. Yet Jimson must leave something. And again he bent himself to the task. Presently the penetrating chill of the houseboat began to attack the very seat of life. He desisted from his unremunerative trial, and, to the audible annoyance of the rats, walked briskly up and down the cabin. Still he was cold. This is all nonsense, said he. I don't care about the risk, but I will not catch catarrh. I must get out of this den. He stepped on deck, and passing to the bow of his embarkation, looked for the first time up the river. He started. Only a few hundred yards above another houseboat lay moored among the willows. It was very spick and span. An elegant canoe hung at the stern. The windows were concealed by snowy curtains. A flag floated from a staff. The more Gideon looked at it, the more there mingled with his disgust a sense of impotent surprise. It was very like his uncle's houseboat. It was exceedingly like, it was identical, but for 2 circumstances, he could have sworn it was the same. The first, that his uncle had gone to Maidenhead, might be explained away by that flightiness of purpose, which is so common a trait among the more than usually manly. The second, however, was conclusive. It was not in the least like Mr. Bloomfield to display a banner on his floating residence. And if he ever did, it would certainly be dyed in hues of emblematical propriety. Now the squirradical, like the vast majority of the more manly, had drawn knowledge at the wells of Cambridge. He was wooden spoon in the year 1850, and the flag upon the houseboat streamed on the afternoon air with the colors of that seat of Toryism, that cradle of Puseyism, that home of the inexact and the effete Oxford. Still was strangely like, thought Gideon, and as he thus looked and thought, the door opened, and a young lady stepped forth on deck. The barrister dropped and fled into his cabin. It was Julia Hazeltine. Through the window he watched her draw in the canoe, get on board of it, cast off, and come dropping downstream in his direction. Well, all is up now, said he, and he fell on a seat. Good afternoon, miss, said a voice on the water. Gideon knew it for the voice of his landlord. Good afternoon, replied Julia, but I don't know who you are, do I? Oh, yes, I do, though. You are the nice man that gave us leave to sketch from the old houseboat. Gideon's heart leaped with fear. That's it, returned the man. And what I wanted to say was, as you couldn't do it any more. You see, I've let it. Let it, cried Julia. Let it for a month, said the man. Seems strange, don't it? Can't see what the party wants with it. It seems very romantic of him, I think, said Julia. What sort of a person is he? Julia in her canoe, the landlord and his wherry, were close alongside and holding on by the gun of the houseboat, so that not a word was lost on Gideon. He's a music man, said the landlord, or at least that's what he told me, miss. Come down here to write an op-ra. Really? Cried Julia. I never heard of anything so delightful. Why? We shall be able to slip down at night and hear him improvise. What is his name? Jimson, said the man. Jimson? Repeated Julia, and interrogate her memory in vain. But indeed our rising school of English music boasts so many professors that we rarely hear of one till he has made a baronet. Are you sure you have it right? Made him spell it to me, replied the landlord. J-I-M-S-O-N Jimson, and his opera is called Some Kind of Tea. Some Kind of Tea, cried the girl. What a very singular name for an opera. What can it be about? And Gideon heard her pretty laughter flow abroad. We must try to get acquainted with this Mr. Jimson. I feel sure he must be nice. Well, miss, I'm afraid I must be going on. I got to be at Havering, you see. Oh, don't let me keep you, you kind man, said Julia. Good afternoon. Good afternoon to you, miss. Gideon sat in the cabin a prey to the most harrowing thoughts. Here he was anchored to a rotting houseboat, soon to be anchored to it still more emphatically by the presence of the corpse. And here was the country buzzing about him, and young ladies already proposing pleasure parties to surround his house at night. Well, that meant the gallows, and much he cared for that. What troubled him now was Julia's indescribable levity. That girl would scrape acquaintance with anybody. She had no reserve, none of the enamel of the lady. She was familiar with a brute like his landlord. She took an immediate interest, which she lacked even the delicacy to conceal, in a creature like Jimson. He could conceive her asking Jimson to have tea with her. And it was for a girl like this that a man like Gideon, down manly heart. He was interrupted by a sound that sent him whipping behind the door in a trice. Miss Hazeltine had stepped on board the houseboat. Her sketch was promising, judging from the stillness. She supposed Jimson not yet come, and she had decided to seize occasion and complete the work of art. Down she sat therefore in the bow, produced her block in watercolors, and was soon singing over what used to be called the ladylike accomplishment. Thus, then, were these two young persons occupied, Gideon attacking the perfect number with resolution, Julia vigorously stippling incongruous colors on her block, when Providence dispatched into these waters a steam launch asthmatically panting up the Thames. All along the banks the waters swelled and fell, and the reeds rustled. The houseboat itself, that ancient stationary creature, became suddenly imbued with life, and rolled briskly at her moorings, like a sea-going ship when she begins to smell the harbor bar. "Mr. Jimson," she cried. "Mr. Jimson, here, come. You must come, you know, sooner or later, for I can't get off without you. Oh, don't be so exceedingly silly. Oh, please come." Still there was no reply. There were the remains of Jimson's lunch. He likes rather nice things to eat, she thought. Oh, I am sure he is quite a delightful man. I wonder if he is as good-looking as Mr. Forsyth. Mrs. Jimson. I don't believe it sounds as nice as Mrs. Forsyth, but then Gideon is so really odious. And here is some of his music, too. This is delightful. Orange Pico. Oh, that's what he meant by some kind of tea. And she trilled with laughter. Adagio molto espressivo, sempre legato, she read next. For the literary part, composer's business Gideon was well equipped. How very strange to have all these directions, and only 3 or 4 notes. Oh, here's another with some more. Andante patetico. And she began to glance over the music. Oh, dear me, she thought. He must be terribly modern. It all seems discords to me. Let's try the air. It is very strange. It seemed familiar. She began to sing it, and suddenly broke off with laughter. Why, it's Tommy Make Room for Your Uncle, she cried aloud, so that the soul of Gideon was filled with bitterness. Andante patetico, indeed. The man must be a mere impostor. And just at this moment there came a confused, scuffling sound from underneath the table, a strange note, like that of a barn door fowl, ushered in a most explosive sneeze. The head of the sufferer was at the same time brought smartly in contact with the boards above, and the sneeze was followed by a hollow groan. Julia fled to the door, and there, with the salutary instinct of the brave, turned and faced the danger. There was no pursuit. The sounds continued. Below the table a crouching figure was indistinctly to be seen jostled by the throes of a sneezing fit. And that was all. Surely, thought Julia, this is most unusual behavior. He cannot be a man of the world. Meanwhile, the dust of years had been disturbed by the young barrister's convulsions, and the sneezing fit was succeeded by a passionate access of coughing. Julia began to feel a certain interest. "I am afraid you are really quite ill," she said, drawing a little nearer. "Please don't let me put you out, and do not stay under that table, Mr. Jimson. Indeed, it cannot be good for you." Mr. Jimson only answered by a distressing cough, and the next moment the girl was on her knees, and their faces had almost knocked together under the table. "Oh, my gracious goodness!" exclaimed Miss Hazeltine, and sprang to her feet. Mr. Forsyth gone mad. "I am not mad," said the gentleman ruefully, extricating himself from his position. "Dearest, Miss Hazeltine, I vow to you upon my knees, I am not mad." "You are not," she cried, panting. "I know," he said, that to a superficial eye my conduct may appear unconventional. If you are not mad, it was no conduct at all, cried the girl with a flash of color, and showed you did not care one penny for my feelings. This is the very devil and all. I know, I admit that, cried Gideon, with a great effort of manly candor. It was abominable conduct, said Julia with energy. I know it must have shaken your esteem, said the barrister. But, dearest Miss Hazeltine, I beg of you to hear me out. My behavior, strange as it may seem, is not unsusceptible of explanation, and I positively cannot and will not consent to continue to try to exist without the esteem of one whom I admire. The moment is ill-chosen. I am well aware of that, but I repeat the expression, one whom I admire. There was only one creature who heard it without joy, and that was her unfortunate admirer. Miss Hazeltine, he said, in a voice that tottered with annoyance, I speak as your sincere well-wisher, but this can only be called levity. I can't withdraw the word, he said. Already the freedom with which I heard you hobnobbing with a boatman gave me exquisite pain. Then there was a want of reserve about Jimson. But Jimson appears to be yourself, objected Julia. I am far from denying that, cried the barrister, but you did not know it at the time. What could Jimson be to you? Who is Jimson? Miss Hazeltine, it cut me to the heart. Really, this seems to me to be very silly, returned Julia, with severe decision. You behave in the most extraordinary manner. You pretend you are able to explain your conduct, and instead of doing so, you begin to attack me. And sitting down beside her on the deck, he poured forth his miserable history. Oh, Mr. Forsyth, she cried when he had done, I am so sorry. Wish I hadn't laughed at you. Only you know you really were so exceedingly funny. But I wish I hadn't, and I wouldn't either if I had only known. And she gave him her hand. Because you have been so silly and got into such dreadful trouble? You poor boy, no, cried Julia, and in the warmth of the moment, reached him her other hand. You may count on me, she added. Really? Said Gideon. Really and really, replied the girl. No more have I, said Julia. But don't you think it's perhaps time you gave me back my hands? La si darum la mano, said the barrister. The merest moment more. I have so few friends, he added. I thought it was considered such a bad account of a young man to have no friends, observed Julia. Oh, but I have crowds of friends, cried Gideon. That's not what I mean. I feel the moment is ill-chosen. But oh, Julia, if you could only see yourself. Mr. Forsyth. Don't call me by that beastly name, cried the youth. Call me Gideon. Not at all, protested Gideon. We met at Bournemouth ever so long ago. I never forgot you since. Say you never forgot me. Say you never forgot me and call me Gideon. Isn't this rather a want of reserve about Jimson? Inquired the girl. Oh, I know I am an ass, cried the barrister, and I don't care a halfpenny. I know I'm an ass, and you may laugh at me to your heart's delight. And as Julia's lips opened with a smile, he once more dropped into music. There's a land of cherry isle, he sang, courting her with his eyes. It's like an opera, said Julia, rather faintly. And Uncle Ned will give us some money to go on upon in the meanwhile, he said at last. Well, I call that cool, said a cheerful voice at his elbow. Gideon and Julia sprang apart with wonderful alacrity, the latter annoyed to observe that although they had never moved since they sat down, they were now quite close together, both presenting faces of a very heightened color to the eyes of Mr. Edward Hugh Bloomfield. That gentleman, coming up the river in his boat, had captured the truant canoe, and divining what had happened, had thought to steal a march upon Miss Hazeltine at her sketch. He had unexpectedly brought down two birds with one stone, and as he looked upon a pair of flushed and breathless culprits, the pleasant human instinct of the matchmaker softened his heart. Well, I call that cool, he repeated. You seem to count very securely upon Uncle Ned. But look here, Gid, I thought I had told you to keep away? To keep away from Maidenhead, replied Gid. But how should I expect to find you here? There is something in that, Mr. Bloomfield admitted. You see, I thought it better that even you should be ignorant of my address. Those rascals, the Finsburys, will have wormed out of you, And just to put them off the scent, I hoisted these abominable colors. But that is not all, Gid. You promised me to work, and here I find you playing a fool at Padwick. What's this, Gid? Inquired the uncle. Have you been fighting, or is it a bill? It's much worse than that, said Gideon. A combination of circumstances really providentially unjust. In fact, a syndicate of murderers seem to perceive my latent ability to rid them of the traces of their crime. It's a legal study after all, you see. And with these words, Gideon, for the second time that day, began to describe the adventures of the Broadwood Grand. Do you want to get me disbarred? Asked Gideon. Disbarred? Come, it can't be as bad as that, said his uncle. It's a good, honest, liberal government that's in, and they would certainly move at my request. Thank God, the days of Tory jobbery are at an end. It wouldn't do, Uncle Ned, said Gideon. But you're not mad enough, cried Mr. Bloomfield, to persist in trying to dispose of it yourself. There is no other path open to me, said Gideon. It's not common sense, and I will not hear of it, cried Mr. Bloomfield. I command you, positively, Gid, to desist from this criminal interference. Very well, then I hand it over to you, said Gideon, and you can do what you like with the dead body. God forbid, ejaculated the president of the Radical Club. I'll have nothing to do with it. Then you must allow me to do the best I can, returned his nephew. Believe me, I have a distinct talent for this sort of difficulty. We might forward it to that pest house, the Conservative Club. Observe Mr. Bloomfield. It might damage them in the eyes of their constituents, and it could be profitably worked up in the local journal. If you see any political capital in the thing, said Gideon, you may have it from me. No, Gid, no, I thought you might. I will have no hand in the thing. On reflection, it's highly undesirable that either I or Miss Hazeltine should linger here. We might be observed, said the president, looking up and down the river, and in my public position the consequences would be painful for the party. And, at any rate, it's dinner time. What? Cried Gideon, plunging for his watch. And so it is. Great heaven. The piano should have been here hours ago. Mr. Bloomfield was clambering back into his boat, but at these words he paused. I saw it arrive myself at the station. I hired a carrier man. He had a round to make, but he was to be here by 4 at the latest, cried the barrister. No doubt the piano is open and the body found. You must fly at once, cried Mr. Bloomfield. It's the only manly step. But suppose it's all right, wailed Gideon. Suppose the piano comes, and I am not here to receive it? I shall have hanged myself by my cowardice. No, Uncle Ned, inquiries must be made in Padwick. I dare not go, of course, but you can hang about the police office, don't you see? No, Kid, no, my dear nephew, said Mr. Bloomfield, with the voice of one on the rack. I regard you with the most sacred affection, and I thank God I am an Englishman and all that, but not the police, Gid. Then you desert me, said Gideon. Say it plainly. Far from it, protested Mr. Bloomfield. I only propose caution. Common sense, Gid, should always be an Englishman's guide. Will you let me speak? Said Julia. I think Gideon had better leave this dreadful houseboat and wait among the willows over there. If the piano comes, then he could step out and take it in. And if the police come, he could slip into our houseboat, and there needn't be any more Jimson at all. He could go to bed, and we could burn his clothes, couldn't we? In the steam launch. And then really it seems as if it would be all right. Mr. Bloomfield is so respectable, you know, and such a leading character. It would be quite impossible even to fancy that he could be mixed up with it. This young lady has strong common sense, said the square radical. Oh, I don't think I'm at all a fool, said Julia with conviction. But what if neither of them come? Asked Gideon. What shall I do then? Why, then, said she, you had better go down to the village after dark, and I can go with you, and then I am sure you can never be suspected. And even if you were, I could tell them it was altogether a mistake. I will not permit that. I will not suffer Miss Hazeltine to go, cried Mr. Bloomfield. Why? Asked Julia. Mr. Bloomfield had not the least desire to tell her why, for it was simply a craven fear of being drawn himself into the imbroglio. But with the usual tactics of a man who is ashamed of himself, he took the high hand. God forbid, my dear Miss Hazeltine, that I should dictate to a lady on the question of propriety, he began. Oh, is that all? Interrupted Julia. Then we must go, all three. Caught, thought the square radical. Chapter 12. Positively the last appearance of the Broadwood Grand. England is supposed to be unmusical, but without dwelling on the patronage extended to the organ grinder, without seeking to found any argument on the prevalence of the Jew's trump, there is surely one instrument that may be said to be national in the fullest acceptance of the word. The herd boy in the broom, already musical in the days of Father Chaucer, startles and perhaps pains the lark with this exiguous pipe, and in the hands of the skilled bricklayer, the thing becomes a trumpet, whence he blows. As a general rule, either the British Grenadiers or Cherry Ripe. The latter airs indeed the shibboleth and diploma piece of the penny whistler. I hazard a guess it was originally composed for this instrument. It is singular enough that a man should be able to gain a livelihood, or even a tide over a period of unemployment, by the display of a proficiency upon the penny whistle. Still more so, that the professional should almost invariably confine himself to Cherry Ripe. But indeed, singularities surround the subject, thick like blackberries. Why, for instance, should the pipe be called a penny whistle? I think no one ever bought it for a penny. Why should the alternative name be tin whistle? I am grossly deceived if it be made of tin. Lastly, in what deaf catacomb, in what earless desert, does a beginner pass the excruciating interval of his apprenticeship? We have all heard people learning the piano, the fiddle, and the cornet, but the young of the penny whistler, like that of the salmon, is a cult from observation. He is never heard until proficient, and Providence, perhaps alarmed by the works of Mr. Mallock, defends human hearing from his first attempt upon the upper octave. A really noteworthy thing was taking place in a green lane, not far from Padwick. On the bench of a carrier's cart there sat a tow-headed, lanky, modest-looking youth. The reins were on his lap. The whip lay behind him in the interior of the cart. The horse proceeded without guidance or encouragement. The carrier or the carrier's man, wrapped into a higher sphere than that of his daily occupations, his looks dwelling on the skies, devoted himself wholly to a brand-new deep penny whistle, whence he diffidently endeavored to elicit that pleasing melody, the ploughboy. To any observant person who should have chanced to saunter in that lane, the hour would have been thrilling. Here at last, he would have said, is the beginner. The tow-headed youth, whose name was Harker, had just encored himself for the 19th time, when he was struck into the extreme confusion by the discovery that he was not alone. That's as good as I want to hear. Perhaps a little oilier in the run, the voice suggested, with meditative gusto. Give it us again. Harker glanced, from the depths of his humiliation, at the speaker. He beheld a powerful, sun-browned, clean-shaven fellow, about 40 years of age, striding beside the cart with non-commissioned military bearing, and as he strode, spinning in the air a cane. The fellow's clothes were very bad, but he looked clean and self-reliant. I'm only a beginner, gasped the blushing Harker. I didn't think anybody could hear me. Well, I like that, returned the other. You're a pretty old beginner. Come, I'll give you a lead myself. Give us a seat here beside you. The next moment the military gentleman was perched on the cart, pipe in hand. He gave the instrument a knowing rattle on the shaft, mouthed it, appeared to commune for a moment with the muse, and dashed into the girl I left behind me. Oh, not after you, cried Harker. You're a professional. No, said his companion, an amateur like yourself. That's one style of play. Yours is the other, and I like it best. But I began when I was a boy, you see, before my taste was formed. When you're my age, you'll play that thing like a corneted piston. Give us that air again. How does it go? And he affected to endeavor to recall the ploughboy. A timid, insane hope sprang in the breast of Harker. Was it possible? Was there something in his playing? It had, indeed, seemed to him at times as if he got a kind of richness out of it. Was he a genius? Meantime, the military gentleman stumbled over the air. No, said the unhappy Harker, that's not quite it. It goes this way, just to show you. And, taking the pipe between his lips, he sealed his doom. When it played the air, and then a second time and a third, when the military gentleman had tried it once more and once more failed, when it became clear to Harker that he, the blushing debutante, was actually giving a lesson to this full-grown flutist, and the flutist under his care was not very brilliantly progressing. How am I to tell what floods of glory brighten the autumnal countryside? How, unless the reader were an amateur himself, describe the heights of idiotic vanity to which the carrier climbed? One significant fact shall paint the situation. Thenceforth it was Harker who played, and the military gentleman listened and approved. As he listened, however, he did not forget the habit of soldierly precaution, looking both behind and before. He looked behind and computed the value of the carrier's load, divining the contents of the brown paper parcels and the portly hamper, and briefly setting down the grand piano in the brand-new piano case as difficult to get rid of. He looked before and spied at the corner of the green lane a little country public house embowered in roses. "I'll have a shy at it," concluded the military gentleman, and roundly proposed a glass. "Well, I'm not a drinking man," said Harker. In the Blue Lion, which was the name of the country public house, Color Sergeant Brand introduced his new friend, Mr. Harker, to a number of ingenious mixtures, calculated to prevent the approaches of intoxication. These he explained to be requisite in the service, so that a self-respecting officer should always appear upon parade in a condition honorable to his corps. The most efficacious of these devices was to lace a pint of mild ale with tuppence worth of London gin. I am pleased to hand in this recipe to the discerning reader, who may find it useful even in civil station, for the effect upon Mr. Harker was revolutionary. He must be helped on board his own wagon, where he proceeded to display a spirit entirely given over to mirth and music, alternately hooting with laughter, to which the sergeant hastened to bear chorus, and incoherently tootling on the pipe. The man-of-war, meantime, unostentatiously possessed himself the reins. It was plain he had a taste for the secluded beauties of an English landscape, for the cart, although it wandered under his guidance for some time, was never observed to issue on the dusty highway, journeying between hedge and ditch, and for the most part under overhanging boughs. It was plain, besides, he had an eye to the true interests of Mr. Harker, for though the cart drew up more than once at the doors of public houses, it was only the sergeant who set foot to ground, and being equipped himself with a quart bottle, once more proceeded on his rural drive. "If you come to before daylight," thought the sergeant, "I shall be surprised for one." From the various pockets of the slumbering carrier, he gently collected the sum of 17 shillings and 8 pence sterling, and, getting once more into the cart, drove thoughtfully away. He turned it, and found himself upon the riverside. A little above him the lights of a houseboat shone cheerfully, and already close at hand, so close that it was impossible to avoid their notice. 3 persons, a lady and 2 gentlemen, were deliberately drawing near. The sergeant put his trust in the convenient darkness of the night, and drove on to meet them. One of the gentlemen, who was of a portly figure, walked in the midst of the fairway, and presently held up a staff by way of signal. Dark as it was, it seemed to the sergeant as though the slimmer of the 2 gentlemen had made a motion to prevent the other speaking, and, finding himself too late, had skipped aside with some alacrity. At another season, Sergeant Brand would have paid more attention to fact, but he was immersed in the perils of his own predicament. "Ah," said the portly gentleman, and stood aside to let the sergeant pass. The lady appeared to bend forward and study the cart with every mark of sharpened curiosity, the slimmer gentleman still keeping in the rear. "I wonder what the devil they would be at," thought Sergeant Brand, and, looking fearfully back, he saw the trio standing together in the midst of the way, like folk consulting. The bravest of military heroes are not always equal to themselves as to their reputation, and fear, on some singular provocation, will find a lodgment in the most unfamiliar bosom. The word detective might have been heard to gurgle in the sergeant's throat, and vigorously applying the whip, he fled up the riverside road to Great Havram at the gallop of the carrier's horse. "It's the most extraordinary thing," cried the slimmer of the 2 gentlemen, "but that's the cart." "Oh, it's the cart?" "Certainly. And the extraordinary thing is, it's not the man," added the first. "It must be the man, Gid, it must be," said the portly one. "Well, then why is he running away?" asked Gideon. "His horse bolted, I suppose," said the squirrel radical. Nonsense. I heard the whip going like a flail, said Gideon. It simply defies the human reason. I'll tell you, broke in the girl. He came round that corner. Suppose we went and, what do you call it in books? Followed his trail? There may be a house there, or somebody who saw him, or something. Well, suppose we did, for the fun of the thing, said Gideon. The fun of the thing, it would appear, consisted in an extremely close juxtaposition of himself and Miss Hazeltine. To Uncle Ned, who was excluded from these simple pleasures, the excursion appeared hopeless from first, and when a fresh perspective of darkness opened up, dimly contained between park palings on the one side and a hedge and ditch upon the other, the whole without the smallest signal of human habitation, the squirrel radical drew up. This is a wild goose chase, said he, with the cessation of footfalls. Another sound smote upon their ears. Oh, what's that? Cried Julia. I can't think, said Gideon. The squirrel radical had his stick presented like a sword. Gid, he began, Oh, Mr. Forsyth, cried the girl. Oh, don't go forward. You don't know what it might be. It might be something perfectly horrid. It may be the devil itself, said Gideon, disengaging himself. But I am going to see it. Don't be rash, Gid, cried his uncle. The barrister drew near to the sound, which was certainly of a portentous character. In quality, it appeared to blend the strains of the cow, the foghorn, and the mosquito, and the startling manner of its enunciation added incalculably to its terrors. A dark object, not unlike the human form divine, appeared on the brink of the ditch. It's a man, said Gideon. It's only a man. He seemed to be asleep and snoring. Hello, he added, a moment after. There must be something wrong with him. He won't waken. Gideon produced his vestas, struck one, and by its light recognized the towhead of Harker. This is the man, said he, as drunk as Belial. I see the whole story. And to his two companions, who had now ventured to rejoin him, he set forth the theory of the divorce between the carrier and his cart, which was not unlike the truth. Drunken brute, said Uncle Ned. Let's get him to a pump and give him what he deserves. Not at all, said Gideon. It is highly undesirable you should see us together. And really, do you know, I am very much obliged to him, for this is about the luckiest thing that could have possibly occurred. It seems to me, Uncle Ned, I declare to heaven it seems to me. I'm clear of it. Clear of what? Asked the squirrel radical. The whole affair, cried Gideon. That man has been ass enough to steal the cart and the dead body. What he hopes to do with it, I neither know nor care. My hands are free. Jimson ceases. Down with Jimson. Shake hand with me. Uncle Ned, Julia, darling girl, Julia, Gideon, said his uncle. Oh, it's all right, Uncle, when we're going to be married so soon, said Gideon. You know you said so yourself in the houseboat. Did I? Said Uncle Ned. I am certain I said no such thing. Appeal to him. Tell him he did. Get on his soft side, cried Gideon. He's a real brick, if you get on his soft side. Dear Mr. Bloomfield, said Julia, I know Gideon will be such a very good boy, and he has promised me to do such a lot of law, and I will see that he does too. And you know it is so very steadying to young men. Everybody admits that. Though, of course, I know I have no money, Mr. Bloomfield, she added. My dear young lady, as this rapscallion told you today on the boat, Uncle Ned is plenty, said the squirrel radical, and I can never forget that you have been shamefully defrauded. So as there's nobody looking, you had better give your Uncle Ned a kiss. There, you rogue, resumed Mr. Bloomfield, when the ceremony had been daintily performed. This very pretty young lady is yours, and a vast deal more than you deserve. But now, let's get back to the houseboat, get up steam on the launch, and away back to town. That's the thing, cried Gideon. And tomorrow there will be no houseboat, and no Jimson, and no carrier's cart, and no piano. And when Harker awakes on the ditch side, he may tell himself the whole affair has been a dream. Aha, said Uncle Ned. But there's another man who will have a different awakening. That fellow in the cart will find he has been too clever by half. Uncle Ned and Julia, said Gideon, I am as happy as the king of Tartary. My heart is like a threepenny bit. My heels are like feathers. I'm out of all my troubles. Julia's hand is in mine. Is this a time for anything but handsome sentiments? Why, there's not room in me for anything that's not angelic. And when I think of that poor unhappy devil in the cart, I stand here tonight in chapter 13, The Tribulations of Morris, part the second. In a really polite age of literature, I would have scorned to cast my eye again on the contortions of Morris. But the study is in the spirit of the day. It presents, besides, features a high, almost a repulsive morality, and if it should prove the means of preventing any respectable and inexperienced gentleman from plunging lightheartedly into crime, even political crime, this work will not have been penned in vain. He rose on the morrow of his night with Michael, rose from the leaden slumber distress, to find his hand tremulous, his eyes closed with rheum, his throat parched, and his digestion obviously paralyzed. Lord knows it's not from eating, Morris thought, and as he dressed he reconsidered his position under several heads. Nothing will so well depict the troubled seas in which he was now voyaging as a review of these various anxieties. I have thrown them, for the reader's convenience, into a certain order, but in the mind of one poor human equal they whirl together like the dust of hurricanes. With the same obliging preoccupation, I have put a name to each of his distresses, and it will be observed with pity that every individual item would have graced and commended the cover of a railway novel. Anxiety the first, Where is the Body? Or The Mystery of Bent Pitman. It was now manifestly plain that Bent Pitman, as was to be looked for from his ominous appellation, belonged to the darker order of the criminal class. An honest man would not have cashed the bill. A humane man would not have accepted in silence the tragic contents of the water butt. A man who was not already up to the hilt in gore would have lacked the means of secretly disposing them. This process of reasoning left a horrid image of the monster, Pitman. Doubtless he had long ago disposed of the body, dropping it through a trapdoor in his back kitchen, Morris supposed, with some hazy recollection of a picture in a penny dreadful, and doubtless the man now lived in wanton splendor on the proceeds of the bill. So far, all was peace. But with the profligate habits of a man like Bent Pitman, who was no doubt a hunchback in the bargain, £800 could be easily melted in a week. When they were gone, what would he be likely to do next? A hell-like voice of Morris's own bosom gave the answer. Blackmail me. Anxiety the second, The Fraud of the Tontine. Or is my uncle dead? This, on which all Morris's hopes depended, was yet a question. He had tried to bully Tina. He had tried to bribe her, and nothing came of it. He had his moral conviction still. But you cannot blackmail a sharp lawyer on a moral conviction. And besides, since his interview with Michael, the idea wore a less attractive countenance. Was Michael the man to be blackmailed? And was Morris the man to do it? Grave considerations. It's not that I'm afraid of him, Morris so far condescended to reassure himself. But I must be very certain of my ground, and the deuce of it is, I see no way. How unlike is life to novels? I wouldn't have even begun this business in a novel, but would I have met a dark, slouching fellow in the Oxford Road, who'd have become my accomplice, and known all about how to do it, and probably broken into Michael's house at night and found nothing but a waxwork image, and then blackmailed or murdered me. But here in real life, I might walk the streets till I dropped dead, and none of the criminal classes would look near me. Though, to be sure, there is always Pitman, he added thoughtfully. Anxiety the third, The Cottage at Browndean, or The Underpaid Accomplice. For he had an accomplice, and that accomplice was blooming unseen in a damp cottage in Hampshire with empty pockets. What could be done about that? He really ought to have sent him something. It was only a post office order for 5 bob, enough to prove that he was kept in mind, enough to keep him in hope, beer, and tobacco. But what would you have, thought Morris, and ruefully poured into his hand a half-crown, a florin, and 8 pence in small change. For a man in Morris's position, at war with all society, and conducting, with a hand of inexperience, a widely ramified intrigue, the sum was already a derision. John would have to be doing, no mistake of that. But then, asked a hell-like voice, how long is John likely to stand it? Anxiety the fourth, The Leather Business, or The Shutters at Last, A Tale of the City. On this head Morris had no news. He had not yet dared to visit the family concern. Yet he knew he must delay no longer, and if anything had been wanted to sharpen this conviction, Michael's references of the night before rang ambiguously in his ear. Well and good. To visit the city might be indispensable, but what was he to do when he was there? He had no right to sign in his own name. And with all the will in the world, he seemed to lack the art of signing with his uncle's. Under these circumstances, Morris could do nothing procrastinate the crash. And when prying eyes began to be applied to every joint of his behavior, two questions could not fail to be addressed, sooner or later, to a speechless and perspiring insolvent. Where is Mr. Joseph Finsbury? And how about your visit to the bank? Questions, how easy to put. Ye gods, how impossible to answer. The man to whom they should be addressed went certainly to jail, and what was this? Possibly to the gallows. Morris was trying to shave when this idea struck him, and he laid the razor down. Here, in Michael's words, was a total disappearance of a valuable uncle. Here was a time of inexplicable conduct on the part of a nephew who had been in bad blood with the old man any time these 7 years. What a chance for a judicial blunder. But no, thought Morris. They dare not make it murder. Not that, but honestly. And speaking as a man to a man, I don't see any other crime in the calendar, except arson, that I don't seem somehow to have committed. And yet, I'm a perfectly respectable man and wish nothing but my due. Law is a pretty business. With this conclusion firmly seated in his mind, Morris Finsbury descended to the hall of the house in John Street, still half-shaven. There was a letter in the box. He knew the handwriting. John at last... Well, I think I might have been spared this, he said bitterly, and tore it open. Dear Morris, what the dickens do you mean by it? I'm in an awful hole down here. I have to go on tick, and the parties on the spot don't cotton to the idea. They couldn't, because it is so plain I'm in a state of destitution. I've got no bedclothes. Think of that. I must have coins. The whole thing's a mockery. I won't stand it. Nobody would. I would have come away before. Only I have no money for the railway fare. Don't be a lunatic, Morris. You don't seem to understand my dreadful situation. I have to get the stamp on tick. A fact. Ever your aft. Brother, J. Finsbury. Can't even spell. Morris reflected as he crammed the letter in his pocket and left the house. What can I do for him? I have to go to the expensive barber. I'm so shattered. How can I send anybody coins? It's hard lines, I dare say. But does he think I'm living on hot muffins? One comfort, was his grim reflection. He can't cut and run. He's got to stay. He's as helpless as the dead. And then he broke forth again. Complains, does he? And he's never even heard of Ben Pittman. If he had what I have on my mind, he might complain with a good grace. But these were not honest arguments or not wholly honest. There was a struggle in the mind of Morris. He could not disguise from himself that his brother John was miserably situated at Browndean, without news, without money, without bedclothes, without society or any entertainment. And by the time he had been shaved and picked a hasty breakfast at a coffee tavern, Morris had arrived at a compromise. Poor Johnny, he said to himself. He's in an awful box. I can't send him coins, but I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll send him the pink un. It'll cheer John up. And besides, it'll do his credit good getting anything by post. Accordingly, on his way to the leather business, whither he proceeded, according to his thrifty habit, on foot, Morris purchased and dispatched a single copy of that enlivening periodical, to which, in a sudden pang of remorse, he added at random the Athenaeum, the Revivalist, and the Penny Pictorial Weekly. So there was John set up with literature, and Morris had laid balm upon his conscience. As if to reward him, he was received in his place of business with good news. Orders were pouring in. There was a run on some of the back stock, and the figure had gone up. Even the manager appeared elated. As for Morris, who had almost forgotten the meaning of good news, he longed to sob like a little child. He could have caught the manager, a pallid man with startled eyebrows, to his bosom. He could have found in his generosity to give a check for a small sum to every clerk in the counting house. As he sat and opened his letters, a chorus of airy vocalists sang in his brain, to most exquisite music. This whole concern may be profitable yet, profitable yet, profitable yet. To him, in this sunny moment of relief, enter a Mr. Rogerson, a creditor, but not one who was expected to be pressing, for his connection with the firm was old and regular. "Oh, Finsbury," said he, not without embarrassment. It's of course only fair to let you know. The fact is, money is a trifle tight. I have some paper out. For that matter, everyone's complaining, and in short. It has never been our habit, Rogerson, said Morris, turning pale. But give me time to turn round, and I'll see what I can do. I dare say we can let you have something to account. Well, that's just where it is, replied Rogerson. I was tempted. I've let the credit out of M.Y. hands. Out of your hands? Repeated Morris. That's playing rather fast and loose with us, Mr. Rogerson. Well, I got cent for cent for it, said the other, on the nail in a certified check. Cent for cent, cried Morris. Why, that's something like 30% bonus. A singular thing. Who's the party? Don't know the man, was the reply. Name of Moss. A Jew, Morris reflected, when his visitor was gone. And what could a Jew want with a claim of? He verified the amount in the books. A claim of 358.1910 against the House of Finsbury. And why should he pay cent for cent? The figure proved the loyalty of Rogerson. Even Morris admitted that. But it proved, unfortunately, something else. The eagerness of Moss. The claim must have been wanted instantly. For that day, for that morning even. Why? The mystery of Moss promised to be a fit pendant to the mystery of Pittman. And just when all was looking well, too, cried Morris, smiting his hand upon the desk. And almost at the same moment, Mr. Moss was announced. Mr. Moss was a radiant Hebrew, brutally handsome and offensively polite. He was acting, it appeared, for a third party. He understood nothing of the circumstances. His client desired to have his position regularized, but he would accept an annotated check, annotated by 2 months, if Mr. Finsbury chose. But I don't understand this, said Morris. What made you pay cent per cent for it today? Mr. Moss had no idea, only his orders. The whole thing is thoroughly irregular, said Morris. It is not the custom of the trade to settle at this time of the year. What are your instructions if I refuse? I am to see Mr. Joseph Finsbury, the head of the firm, said Mr. Moss. I was directed to insist on that. It was implied you had no status here. The expressions are not mine. You cannot see Mr. Joseph. He is unwell, said Morris. In that case, I was to place the matter in the hands of a lawyer. Let me see, said Mr. Moss, opening a pocketbook with perhaps suspicious care at the right place. Yes, of Mr. Michael Finsbury. A relation, perhaps? In that case, I presume, the matter will be pleasantly arranged. To pass into the hands of Michael was too much for Morris. He struck his colors. A check at 2 months was nothing. After all, in 2 months he would probably be dead, or in a jail at any rate. He bade the manager give Mr. Moss a chair and the paper. I'm going over to get a check signed by Mr. Finsbury, said he, who is lying ill at John Street. A cab there and a cab back. Here were inroads on his wretched capital. He counted the cost. When he was done with Mr. Moss, he would be left with 12 pence halfpenny in the world. What was even worse, he had now been forced to bring his uncle up to Bloomsbury. No use for poor Johnny in Hampshire now, he reflected. And how the farce is to be kept up completely passes me. At Browndean it was just possible. In Bloomsbury it seems beyond human ingenuity. Though I suppose it's what Michael does. But then he has accomplices, that Scotsman and the whole gang. Ah, if I had accomplices. Necessity is the mother of the arts. Under a spur so immediate, Morris surprised himself by the neatness and dispatch of his new forgery, and within 3/4 of an hour had handed it to Mr. Moss. That is very satisfactory. Observe that, gentleman, rising. I was to tell you it will not be presented, but you had better take care. The room swam round Morris. What's that? He cried, grasping the table. He was miserably conscious the next moment of his shrill tongue and ashen face. What do you mean it will not be presented? Why am I to take care? What is all this mummery? I have no idea, Mr. Finsbury, replied the smiling Hebrew. It was a message I was to deliver. The expressions were put into my mouth. What is your client's name? Asked Morris. That is a secret for the moment, answered Mr. Moss. Morris bent toward him. It's not the bank, he asked hoarsely. I have no authority to say more, Mr. Finsbury, returned Mr. Moss. I will wish you a good morning, if you please. Wish me a good morning, thought Morris, and the next moment, seizing his hat, he fled from his place of business like a madman. 3 streets away, he stopped and groaned. "Lord, I should have borrowed from the manager," he cried. "But it's too late now. It would look dicky to go back. I'm penniless. Simply penniless, like the unemployed." He went home and sat in the dismantled dining room with his head in his hands. Newton never thought harder than this victim of circumstances, and yet no clearness came. "It may be a defect in my intelligence," he cried, rising to his feet, "but I cannot see that I am fairly used. The bad luck I've had is a thing to write to the Times about. It's enough to breed a revolution. And the plain English of the whole thing is that I must have money at once. I'm done with all morality now. I'm long past that stage. Money I must have. And the only chance I see is Bent Pittman. Bent Pittman is a criminal, and therefore his position's weak. He must have some of that 800 left. If his, I'll force him to go shares. And even if he has, I'll tell him the Tontine affair. And with a desperate man like Pittman at my back, it'll be strange if I don't succeed." Well and good, but how to lay hands upon Bent Pittman, except by advertisement, was not so clear. And even so, in what terms to ask a meeting, on what grounds, and where? Not at John Street, for it would never do to let a man like Bent Pittman know your real address, nor yet at Pittman's house, some dreadful place in Holloway, with a trapdoor in the back kitchen, a house which you might enter in a light summer overcoat and varnished boots, to come forth again piecemeal in a market basket. That was the drawback of a really efficient accomplice. Morris felt, not without a shudder. "I never dreamed I should come to actually covet such society," he thought. And then a brilliant idea struck him. Waterloo Station, a public place, yet at certain hours of the day is solitary, a place, besides, the very name of which must knock upon the heart of Pittman, and at once suggest a knowledge of the latest of his guilty secrets. Morris took a piece of paper and sketched his advertisement. "William Bent Pittman. If this should meet the eye of, he will hear of something to his advantage on the far end of the main line departure platform, Waterloo Station. 2 to 4 p.m., Sunday next." Morris reperused this literary trifle with approbation. Terse, he reflected. Something to his advantage is not strictly true, but it's taking an original, and a man is not on oath in an advertisement. All that I require now is the ready cash for my own meals and for the advertisement. And no, I can't lavish money upon John, but I'll give him some more papers. How to raise the wind. He approached his cabinet of signets, and the collector suddenly revolted in his blood. "I will not," he cried. "Nothing shall induce me to massacre my collection. Rather theft." And dashing upstairs to the drawing room, he helped himself to a few of his uncle's curiosities, a pair of Turkish babushes, a Smyrna fan, a water cooler, a musket guaranteed to have been seized from an Ephesian bandit, and a pocketful of curious but incomplete seashells. Chapter 14. William Bent Pittman hears of something to his advantage. On the morning of Sunday, William Dent Pittman rose at his usual hour, although with something more than the usual reluctance. The day before, it should be explained, an addition had been made to his family in the person of a lodger. Michael Finsbury had acted sponsor in the business and guaranteed the weekly bill. On the other hand, no doubt with the spice of his prevailing jocularity, he had drawn a depressing portrait of the lodger's character. Mr. Pittman had been led to understand his guest was not good company. He had approached the gentleman with fear, and had rejoiced to find himself the entertainer of an angel. At tea he had been vastly pleased. Till hard on 1 in the morning, he had sat entranced by eloquence and progressively fortified with information in the studio. And now, as he reviewed over his toilet the harmless pleasures of the evening, the future smiled upon him with revived attractions. "Mr. Finsbury is indeed an acquisition," he remarked to himself, and as he entered the little parlor, where the table was already laid for breakfast, the cordiality of his greeting would have befitted an acquaintanceship already old. "I am delighted to see you, sir." These were his expressions. "And I trust you have slept well." "Accustomed as I have been for so long to a life of almost perpetual change," replied the guest, "the disturbance so often complained of by the more sedentary, as attend their first night in what is called a new bed, is a complaint from which I am entirely free." "I am delighted to hear it," said the drawing master warmly. "But I see I have interrupted you over the paper." "The Sunday paper is one of the features of the age," said Mr. Finsbury. "In America, I am told, It supersedes all other literature, the bone and sinew of a nation finding their requirements catered for. Hundreds of columns will be occupied with interesting details of the world's doings, such as waterspouts, elopements, conflagrations, and public entertainments. There's a corner for politics, ladies' work, chess, religion, and even literature, and a few spicy editorials serve to direct the course of public thought. It is difficult to estimate the part played by such enormous and miscellaneous repositories in the education of the people. But this, though interesting in itself, partakes of the nature of digression, and what I was about to ask you was this. Are you yourself a student of the daily press? There is not much in the papers to interest an artist, returned Pittman. In that case, resumed Joseph, an advertisement which has appeared the last 2 days in various journals, and reappears this morning, may possibly have failed to catch your eye. The name, with a trifling variation, bears a strong resemblance to your own. Ah, here it is. If you please, I will read it to you. William Bent Pittman. If this should meet the eye of, he will hear of something to his advantage at the far end of the main line departure platform, Waterloo Station, 2 to 4 p.m. today. Is that in print? Cried Pittman. Let me see it. Bent? It must be Dent. Something to my advantage? Mr. Finsbury, excuse me offering a word of caution. I am aware how strangely this must sound in your ears, but there are domestic reasons why this little circumstance might perhaps be better kept between ourselves. Mrs. Pittman, my dear sir, I assure you there is nothing dishonorable in my secrecy. The reasons are domestic, merely domestic, and I may set your conscience at rest when I assure you all the circumstances are known to our common friend, your excellent nephew, Mr. Michael, who has not withdrawn from me his esteem. A word is enough, Mr. Pittman, said Joseph, with one of his oriental reverences. Half an hour later, the drawing master found Michael in bed and reading a book, the picture of good humor and repose. Hello, Pittman, he said, laying down his book. What brings you here at this inclement hour? Ought to be in church, my boy. I have little thought of church today, Mr. Finsbury, said the drawing master. I am on the brink of something new, sir. And he presented the advertisement. Why, what is this? Cried Michael, sitting suddenly up. He studied it for half a minute with a frown. Pittman, I don't care about this document a particle, said he. It will have to be attended to, however, said Pittman. I thought you'd had enough of Waterloo, returned the lawyer. Have you started a morbid craving? You've never been yourself anyway since you lost that beard. I believe now it was where you kept your senses. Mr. Finsbury, said the drawing master, I have tried to reason this matter out, and, with your permission, I should like to lay before you the results. Fire away, said Michael. But please, Pittman, remember it's Sunday and let's have no bad language. There are 3 views open to us, began Pittman. First, this may be connected with the barrel. Second, it may be connected with Mr. Semitopoulos' statue. And third, it may be from my wife's brother, who went to Australia. In the first case, which is of course possible, I confess the matter will be best allowed to drop. The court is with you there, Brother Pittman, said Michael. In the second, continued the other, it is plainly my duty to leave no stone unturned for the recovery of the lost antique. My dear fellow, Semitopoulos has come down like a trump. He has pocketed the loss and left you the profit. What more would you have? Inquired the lawyer. I conceive, sir, under correction, that Mr. Semitopoulos' generosity binds me to even greater exertion, said the drawing master. The whole business was unfortunate. I need not disguise it from you. It was illegal from the first. The more reason that I should try to behave like a gentleman, concluded Pittman, flushing. I have nothing to say to that, returned the lawyer. I have sometimes thought I should like to try to behave like a gentleman myself, only it's such a one-sided business, with the world and the legal profession as they are. Then in the third, resumed the drawing master. If it's Uncle Tim, of course, our fortune's made. It's not Uncle Tim, though, said the lawyer. Have you observed that very remarkable expression, something to his advantage? Inquired Pittman shrewdly. You innocent mutton, said Michael. It's the seediest commonplace in the English language, and only proves the advertiser is an ass. Let me demolish your house of cards for you at once. Would Uncle Tim make that blunder in your name? In itself, the blunder is delicious, a huge improvement on the gross reality, and I mean to adopt in the future. But is it like Uncle Tim? No, it's not like him, Pittman admitted. But his mind may have become unhinged at Ballarat. If you come to that, Pittman, said Michael, the advertiser may be Queen Victoria, fired with a desire to make a duke of you. I put it to yourself if that's probable, and yet it's not against the laws of nature. But we sit here to consider probabilities, and with your genteel permission, I eliminate Her Majesty and Uncle Tim on the threshold. To proceed, we have your second idea, that this has some connection with the statue. Possible, but in that case, who is the advertiser? Not Riccardi, for he knows your address. Not the person who got the box, for he doesn't know your name. The van man, I hear you suggest, in a lucid interval. He might have got your name and got it incorrectly at the station, and he might have failed to get your address. I grant the van man. But a question. Do you really wish to meet the van man? Why should I not? Asked Pittman. If he wants to meet you, replied Michael, observe this. It is because he has found his address book, has been to the house that got the statue, and mark my words, is moving at the instigation of the murderer. I should be very sorry to think so, said Pittman, but I still consider my duty to Mr. Cernatopoulos. Pittman, interrupted Michael, this will not do. Don't seek to impose on your legal advisor. Don't try to pass yourself off for the Duke of Wellington, for that is not your line. Come, I wager a dinner I can read your thoughts. You still believe it's Uncle Tim. Mr. Finsbury, said the drawing master, coloring, you are not a man in narrow circumstances, and you have no family. Gwendolen is growing up a very promising girl. She was confirmed this year, and I think you'll be able to enter into my feelings as a parent when I tell you she is quite ignorant of dancing. The boys are at the board school, which is all very well in its way. At least, I am the last man in the world to criticize the institutions of my native land. But I had fondly hoped that Harold might become a professional musician, and little Otho shows a quite remarkable vocation for the church. I am not exactly an ambitious man. Well, well, interrupted Michael, be explicit. You think it's Uncle Tim? It might be Uncle Tim, insisted Pittman. And if it were and I neglected the occasion, how could I ever look my children in the face? I do not refer to Mrs. Pittman. No, you never do, said Michael. But in the case of her own brother returning from Ballarat, continued Pittman, with his mind unhinged, put in the lawyer. Returning from Ballarat with a large fortune, her impatience may be more easily imagined than described, concluded Pittman. All right, said Michael. Be it so. And what do you propose to do? I am going to Waterloo, said Pittman, in disguise. All by your little self? Inquired the lawyer. Well, I hope you think it's safe. Mind and send me word from the police cells. Oh, Mr. Finsbury, I had ventured to hope. Perhaps you might be induced to make one of us, faltered Pittman. Disguise myself on Sunday? Cried Michael. How little you understand my principles. Mr. Finsbury, I have no means of showing you my gratitude, but let me ask you one question, said Pittman. If I were a very rich client, would you not take the risk? Diamond, you know not what you do, cried Michael. Why, man, do you suppose I make a practice of cutting about London with my clients in disguise? Do you suppose money would induce me to touch this business with a stick? I give you my word of honor, it would not. But I own I have a real curiosity to see how you conduct this interview. That tempts me. It tempts me, Pittman, more than gold. It should be exquisitely rich. And suddenly Michael laughed. Well, Pittman, said he, have all the truck ready in the studio. I'll go. About 20 minutes after 2, on this eventful day, the vast and gloomy shed of Waterloo lay, like the temple of a dead religion, silent and deserted. Here and there at one of the platforms, a train lay becalmed. Here and there a wandering footfall echoed. The cab horses outside stamped with startling reverberations on the stones, or from the neighboring wilderness, of railway and engine snorted forth a whistle. The main line departure platform slumbered like the rest. The booking hutches closed. The backs of Mr. Haggard's novels, which upon a weekday the bookstall shines emblazoned, discreetly hidden behind dingy shutters. The The rare officials, undisguisedly somnambulant, and the customary loiterers, even to the middle-aged woman with the ulster and the handbag, fled to more congenial scenes. As in the inmost dells of some small tropic island the throbbing of the ocean lingers, so here a faint pervading hum and trepidation told in every corner of surrounding London. At the hour already named, persons acquainted with John Dixon of Ballarat and Ezra Thomas of the United States of America would have been cheered to behold him enter through the booking office. "What names are we to take?" inquired the latter, anxiously adjusting the window-glass spectacles which he had been suffered on this occasion to assume. "There's no choice for you, my boy," returned Michael. "Ben Pittman or nothing. As for me, I think I look as if I might be called Appleby. Something agreeably old world about Appleby. Breathes of Devonshire cider. Talking of which, suppose you wet your whistle? The interview is likely to be trying." "I think I'll wait till afterwards," returned Pittman. "On the whole, I think I'll wait till the thing's over. I don't know if it strikes you as it does me, but the place seems deserted and silent, Mr. Finsbury, and filled with very singular echoes." "Kind of jack-in-the-box feeling?" inquired Michael, as if all these empty trains might be filled with policemen waiting for a signal, and Sir Charles Warren perched among the girders with a silver whistle to his lips. "It's gilt, Pittman." In this uneasy frame of mind, they walked nearly the whole length of the departure platform, and at the western extremity became aware of a slender figure standing back against a pillar. The figure was plainly sunk into a deep abstraction. He was not aware of their approach, but gazed far abroad over the sunlit station. Michael stopped. "Halloa," said he. "Can that be your advertiser? If so, I'm done with it." And then, on second thoughts, not so, either, he resumed more cheerfully. "Here, turn your back a moment. So, give me the specs." "But you agreed I was to have them," protested Pittman. "Ah, but that man knows me," said Michael. "Does he? What's his name?" cried Pittman. "Oh, he took me into his confidence," returned the lawyer. "But I may say one thing. If he's your advertiser, and he may be, for he seems to have been seized with criminal lunacy, you can go ahead with a clear conscience, for I hold him in the hollow of my hand." The change effected, and Pittman comforted with this good news, the pair drew near to Morris. "Are you looking for Mr. William Ben Pittman?" inquired the drawing master. "I am he." Morris raised his head. He saw before him in the speaker a person of almost indescribable insignificance, in white spats and a shirt cut indecently low. A little behind, a second and more burly figure offered little to criticism, except ulster, whiskers, spectacles, and deerstalker hat. Since he had decided to call up devils from the underworld of London, Morris had pondered deeply on the probabilities of their appearance. His first emotion, like that of Corobo when she beheld the sea, was one of disappointment. His second did more justice to the case. Never before had he seen a couple dressed like these. He had struck a new stratum. "I must speak with you alone," said he. "You need not mind Mr. Appleby," returned Pittman. "He knows all." "All? Do you know what I am here to speak of?" inquired Morris. "The barrel." Pittman turned pale, but it was with manly indignation. "You are the man," he cried. "You very wicked person." "Am I to speak before him?" asked Morris, disregarding these severe expressions. "He has been present throughout," said Pittman. "He opened the barrel. Your guilty secret is already known to him, as well as to your maker and myself." "Well then," said Morris, "what have you done with the money?" "I know nothing about any money," said Pittman. "You needn't try that on," said Morris. "I have tracked you down. You came to the station sacrilegiously disguised as a clergyman, procured my barrel, opened it, rifled the body, and cashed the bill. I have been to the bank. I tell you, I have followed you step by step, and your denials are childish and absurd." Come, Morris, keep your temper," said Mr. Appleby. "Michael," cried Morris. "Michael here too." "Here too," echoed the lawyer. "Here and everywhere, my good fellow. Every step you take is counted. Trained detectives follow you like your shadow. They report to me every 3/4 of an hour. No expense is spared." Morris's face took on a hue of dirty gray. "Well, I don't care. I have the less reserve to keep," he cried. "That man cashed my bill. It's a theft. and I want the money back." "Do you think I would lie to you, Morris?" asked Michael. "I don't know," said his cousin. "I want my money." "It was I alone who touched the body," began Michael. "You?" "Michael," cried Morris, starting back. "Then why haven't you declared the death?" "What the devil do you mean?" asked Michael. "Am I mad? Or are you?" cried Morris. "I think it must be Pittman," said Michael. The three men stared at each other, wild-eyed. "This is dreadful," said Morris. "Dreadful. I do not understand one word that is addressed to me." "I give you my word of honor, no more do I," said Michael. "And in God's name, why Whiskers?" cried Morris, pointing in a ghastly manner at his cousin. "Does my brain reel? How Whiskers?" "Oh, that's a matter of detail," said Michael. There was another silence, during which Morris appeared to himself to be shot in a trapeze as high as St. Paul's and as low as Baker Street Station. "Let us recapitulate," said Michael, "unless it's really a dream, in which case I wish Tina would call me for breakfast. My friend Pittman, here, received a barrel which, it now appears, was meant for you. The barrel contained the body of a man. How or why you killed him?" "I never laid a hand on him," protested Morris. "This is what I've dreaded all along. But think, Michael, I'm not that kind of man. With all my faults, I wouldn't touch a hair of anybody's head, and it was all dead loss to me. He got killed in that vile accident." Suddenly Michael was seized by mirth, so prolonged and excessive that his companion supposed beyond a doubt his reason had deserted him. Again and again he struggled to compose himself, and again laughter overwhelmed him like a tide. In all this maddening interview, there had been no more spectral feature than this of Michael's merriment. And Pittman and Morris, drawn together by the common fear, exchanged glances of anxiety. "Morris," gasped the lawyer, when he was at last able to articulate, "hold on. I see it all now. I can make it clear in one word. Here's the key. I never guessed it was Uncle Joseph till this moment." This remark produced an instant lightening of the tension for Morris. For Pittman, it quenched the last ray of hope and daylight. Uncle Joseph, whom he left an hour ago in Norfolk Street, pasting newspaper cuttings, the dead body. Then who was he, Pittman? And was this Waterloo Station or Coney Hatch? "To be sure," cried Morris. "It was badly smashed, I know. How stupid not to think of that. Why, then all's clear. And my dear Michael, I'll tell you what, we're saved, both saved. You get the tontine. I don't grudge it you the least. And I get the leather business, which is really beginning to look up. Declare the death at once. Don't mind me in the smallest. Don't consider me. Declare the death and we're all right." "Ah, but I can't declare it," said Michael. "Why not?" cried Morris. "I can't produce the corpus, Morris. I've lost it," said the lawyer. "Stop a bit," ejaculated the leather merchant. "How is this? It's not possible. I lost it." "Well, I've lost it too, my son," said Michael with extreme serenity. "Not recognizing it, you see, and suspecting something irregular in its origin, I got rid of, what shall we say? Got rid of the proceeds at once." "You got rid of the body? What made you do that?" wailed Morris. "But you can get it again? You know where it is." "I wish I did, Morris, and you may believe me there, for it would be a small sum in my pocket. But the fact is I don't," said Michael. "Good Lord," said Morris, addressing heaven and earth. "Good Lord, I've lost the leather business." Michael was once more shaken with laughter. "Why do you laugh, you fool?" cried his cousin. "You lose more than I. You've bungled it worse than even I did. If you had a spark of feeling, you would be shaking in your boots with vexation. But I'll tell you one thing. I'll have that £800. I'll have that and go to Swan River. That's mine anyway. And your friend must have forged to cash it. Give me the 800 here upon this platform, or I go straight to Scotland Yard and turn the whole disreputable story inside out." "Morris," said Michael, laying his hand upon his shoulder, "hear reason. It wasn't us. It was the other man. We never even searched the body." "The other man?" repeated Morris. "Yes, the other man. We palmed Uncle Joseph off upon another man," said Michael. "You what? You palmed him off? That's surely a singular expression," said Morris. "Yes, palmed him off for a piano. said Michael with perfect simplicity. Remarkably full, rich tone, he added. Morris carried his hand to his brow and looked at it. It was wet with sweat. Fever, said he. No, it was a Broadwood grand, said Michael. Pittman here will tell you if it was genuine or not. Eh? Oh, yes. I believe it was a genuine Broadwood. I have played upon it several times myself, said Pittman. The 3-letter E was broken. Don't say anything more about pianos, said Morris with a strong shudder. I'm not the man I used to be. This other man. Let's come to him, if I can only manage to follow. Who is he? Where can I get hold of him? Ah, that's the rub, said Michael. He's been in possession of the desired article, let me see, since Wednesday, about 4 o'clock, and is now, I should imagine, on his way to the Isles of Javin and Gadair. Michael, said Morris pleadingly, I am in a very weak state, and I beg your consideration for a kinsman. Say it slowly again, and be sure you are correct. When did he get it? Michael repeated his statement. Yes, that's the worst thing yet, said Morris, drawing his breath. What is? Asked the lawyer. Even the dates are sheer nonsense, said the leather merchant. The bill was cashed on Tuesday. There's not a gleam of reason in the whole transaction. A young gentleman, who had passed the trio and suddenly started and turned back, at this moment laid a heavy hand on Michael's shoulder. Aha, so this is Mr. Dixon, said he. The trump of judgment could scarce have rung with more dreadful note in the ears of Pittman and the lawyer. To Morris, this erroneous name seemed a legitimate enough continuation of the nightmare in which he had so long been wandering. And when Michael, with his brand-new bushy whiskers, broke from the grasp of the stranger and turned to run, and the weird little shaven creature in the low-necked shirt followed his example with a bird-like screech, and the stranger, finding the rest of his prey escape him, pounced with a rude grasp on Morris himself, that gentleman's frame of mind might be very nearly expressed in the colloquial phrase, I told you so. I have one of the gang, said Gideon Forsyth. I do not understand, said Morris dully. Oh, I will make you understand, returned Gideon grimly. You will be a good friend to me if you can make me understand anything, cried Morris, with a sudden energy of conviction. I don't know you personally, do I? Continued Gideon, examining his unresisting prisoner. Never mind. I know your friends. They're your friends, are they not? I do not understand you, said Morris. You had possibly something to do with a piano? Suggested Gideon. A piano! Cried Morris, convulsively clasping Gideon by the arm. Then you're the other man. Where is it? Where's the body? And did you cash the draft? Where's the body? This is very strange, mused Gideon. Do you want the body? Want it, cried Morris. My whole fortune depends upon it. I lost it. Where is it? Take me to it? Oh, you want it, do you? And the other man, Dixon, does he want it? Inquired Gideon. Who do you mean by Dixon? Oh, Michael Finsbury. Why, of course he does. He lost it too. If he had it, he'd have won the tontine tomorrow. Michael Finsbury. Not the solicitor? Cried Gideon. Yes, the solicitor, said Morris. But where is the body? Then that is why he sent the brief. What is Mr. Finsbury's private address? Asked Gideon. 233 King's Road. What brief? Where are you going? Where's the body? Cried Morris, clinging to Gideon's arm. I have lost it myself, returned Gideon, and ran out of the station. Chapter 15. The Return of the Great Vance. Morris returned from Waterloo in a frame of mind that baffles description. He was a modest man. He had never conceived an overweening notion of his own powers. He knew himself unfit to write a book, turn a table napkin ring, entertain a Christmas party with legerdemain, grapple, in short, any of those conspicuous accomplishments that are usually classed under the head of genius. He knew, he admitted, his parts to be pedestrian, but he considered them, until quite lately, fully equal to the demands of life. And today he owned himself defeated. Life had the upper hand. If there had been any means of flight or place to flee to, if the world had been so ordered that a man could leave it like a place of entertainment, Morris would have instantly resigned all further claim on its rewards and pleasures, and, with inexpressible contentment, cease to be, as it was one aim shown before him. He could get home, Even as the sick dog crawls on the sofa, Morris could shut the door at John Street and be alone. The dusk was falling when he drew near this place of refuge, and the first thing that met his eyes was the figure of a man upon the step, alternately plucking at the bell handle and pounding on the panels. The man had no hat. His clothes were hideous with filth. He had the air of a hop picker. Yet Morris knew him. It was John. The first impulse of flight was succeeded, in the elder brother's bosom, by the empty quiescence of despair. What does it matter now, he thought, and drawing forth his latchkey, ascended the steps. John turned about. His face was ghastly with weariness and dirt and fury, and as he recognized the head of his family, he drew in a long, rasping breath, and his eyes glittered. "Open that door," he said, standing back. "I am going to," said Morris, and added mentally, "He looks like murder." The brothers passed into the hall. The door closed behind them, and suddenly John seized Morris by the shoulders and shook him as a terrier shakes a rat. "You mangy little cad," he said, "I'd serve you right to smash your skull," and shook him again, so that his teeth rattled and his head smote upon the wall. "Don't be violent, Johnny," said Morris. "It can't do any good now." "Shut your mouth," said John. "Your time's come to listen." He strode into the dining room, fell into the easy chair, and taking off one of his burst walking shoes, nursed for a while his foot like one in agony. "I'm lame for life," he said. "What is there for dinner?" "Nothing, Johnny," said Morris. "Nothing? What do you mean by that?" inquired the great Vance. "Don't set up your chat to me." "I mean simply nothing," said his brother. "I have nothing to eat and nothing to buy it with. I've only had a cup of tea and a sandwich all this day myself." "Only a sandwich?" sneered Vance. "I suppose you're going to complain next. But you'd better take care. I've had all I mean to take, and I can tell you what it is. I mean to dine and to dine well. Take your signets and sell them." "I can't today," objected Morris. "It's Sunday." "I tell you I'm going to dine," cried the younger brother. "But if it's not possible, Johnny," pleaded the other. "You nincompoop," cried Vance. "Ain't we householders? Don't they know us at that hotel where Uncle Parker used to come? Be off with you. And if you ain't back in half an hour, and if the dinner ain't good, first I'll lick you till you don't want to breathe, and then I'll go straight to the police and blow the gaff. Do you understand that, Morris Finsbury? Because if you do, you had better jump." The idea smiled even upon the wretched Morris, who was sick with famine. He sped upon his errand, and returned to find John still nursing his foot in the armchair. "What would you like to drink, Johnny?" he inquired soothingly. "Fizz," said John. "Some of the poppy stuff in the end bin. A bottle of the old port that Michael liked to follow. And see and don't shake the port. And look here, light the fire and the gas and draw down the blinds. It's cold and it's getting dark. And then you can lay the cloth. And, I say, here you, bring me down some clothes." The room looked comparatively habitable by the time the dinner came, and the dinner itself was good. Strong gravy soup, fillets of sole, mutton chops and tomato sauce, roast beef done rare with roast potatoes, cabinet pudding, a piece of Chester cheese, and some early celery. A meal uncompromisingly British, but supporting. "Thank God," said John, his nostrils sniffing wide, surprised by joy into the unwonted formality of grace. "Now I'm going to take this chair with my back to the fire. There's been a strong frost these 2 last nights, and I can't get out of my bones. The celery will be just a ticket. I'm going to sit here, and you're going to stand there, Morris Finsbury, and play butler." "But, Johnny, I'm so hungry myself," pleaded Morris. "You can have what I leave," said Vance. "You're just beginning to pay your score, my daisy. I owe you £1.10. Don't you rouse the British lion." There was something indescribably menacing in the face and voice of the great Vance as he uttered these words, at which the soul of Morris withered. "There," resumed the feaster, "give us a glass of the fizz to start with. Gravy soup. And I thought I didn't like gravy soup. Do you know how I got here?" he asked, with another explosion of wrath. "No, Johnny. How could I?" said the obsequious Morris. "I walked on my 10 toes," cried John, "tramped the whole way from Browndean, and begged. I would like to see you beg. It's not so easy as you might suppose. I played it on being a shipwrecked mariner from Blythe. I don't know where Blythe is, do you? But I thought it sounded natural. I begged from a little beast of a schoolboy, and he forked out a bit of twine and asked him to make a clove hitch. I did, too, I know I did. But he said it wasn't. He said it was a granny's knot, and I was a watchum, and he would give me in charge. Then I begged from a naval officer. He never bothered me with knots, but he only gave me a tract. There's a nice account of the British Navy, and then from a widow woman that sold lollipops, and I got a hunch of bread from her. Another party I fell in was said you could generally always get bread, and the thing to do was to break a plate glass window and get into jail. Seemed rather a brilliant scheme. Pass the beef. Why didn't you stay at Browndean? Morris ventured to inquire. Skittles, said John. On what? The pink un, and a measly religious paper? I had to leave Browndean. I had to, I tell you. I got ticket of public, and set up to be the great Vance. So would you, if you were leading such a beastly existence. And a card stood me a lot of ale and stuff. And we got swipey, talking about music halls and the piles of tin I got for singing. And then they got me on to sing around her splendid form I weaved a magic circle. And then he said I couldn't be Vance, and I stuck to it like grim death I was. It was right of me to sing, of course. But I thought I could brazen it out with a set of yokels. It settled my hash at the public, said John with a sigh. And then the last thing was a carpenter. Our landlord, inquired Morris. That's the party, said John. He came nosing about the place, and then wanted to know where the water butt was and the bedclothes. I told him to go to the devil. So would you too, when there was no possible thing to say. And then he said I had pawned them, and did I know it was felony? Then I made a pretty neat stroke. I remembered he was deaf, and talked a whole lot of rot, very politely, just so low he couldn't hear a word. I don't hear you, says he. I know you don't, my buck, and I don't mean you to, says I, smiling away like a haberdasher. I'm hard of hearing, he roars. I'd be in a pretty hot corner if you weren't, says I, making signs as if I was explaining everything. It was tip-top as long as it lasted. Well, he said, I'm deaf, worse luck, but I bet the constable can hear you. And off he started one way, and I the other. They got a spirit lamp and the pink un, and that old religious paper, and another periodical you sent me. I think you must have been drunk. It had a name like one of those spots that Uncle Joseph used to hold forth at, and it was all full of the most awful swipes about poetry and the use of the globes. It was the kind of thing that nobody could read out of a lunatic asylum. The Athenaeum, that was the name. Golly, what a paper. Athenaeum, you mean, said Morris. I don't care what you call it, said John. So, as I don't require to take it in, there I feel better. Now I'm going to sit by the fire in the easy chair. Pass me the cheese and the celery and the bottle of port. No, a champagne glass. It holds more. And now you can pitch in. There's some of the fish left and a chop and some fizz. Ah, sighed the refreshed pedestrian. Michael was right about that port. There's old and vat for you. Michael's a man I like. He's clever and reads books and the Athenaeum and all that, but he's not dreary to meet. He don't talk Athenaeum like the other parties. Why, the most of them would throw a blight over a skip alley. Talking of Michael, I ain't bored myself to put the question, because of course I knew it from the first. You've made a hash of it, eh? Michael made a hash of it, said Morris, flushing dark. What do we got to do with that? Inquired John. He has lost a body. That's what we have to do with it, cried Morris. He has lost a body, and the death can't be established. Hold on, said John. I thought you didn't want to? Oh, we're far past that, said his brother. It's not the tontine now. It's the leather business, Johnny. It's the clothes upon our back. Stow the slow music, said John, and tell your story from beginning to end. Morris did as he was bid. Well, now, what did I tell you? Cried the great Vance when the other had done. But I know one thing. I'm not going to be humbugged out of my property. I should like to know what you mean to do, said Morris. I'll tell you that, responded John with extreme decision. I'm going to put my interest in the hands of the smartest lawyer in London, and whether you go to quat or not is a matter of indifference to me. Why, Johnny, we're in the same boat, expostulated Morris. Are we? Cried his brother. I bet we're not. Have I committed forgery? Have I lied about Uncle Joseph? Have I put idiotic advertisements in the comic papers? Have I smashed other people's statues? I like your cheek, Morris Finsbury. No, I've let you run my affairs too long. Now they shall go to Michael. I like Michael, anyway, and it's time I understood my situation. At this moment, the brethren were interrupted by a ring at the bell, and Morris, going timorously to the door, received from the hands of a commissionaire a letter addressed in the hand of Michael. Its contents ran as follows: Morris Finsbury, if this should meet the eye of, he will hear of something to his advantage at my office in Chancery Lane at 10 a.m. tomorrow. Michael Finsbury. So utter was Morris's subjection that he did not wait to be asked, but handed the note to John as soon as he glanced at it himself. "That's the way to write a letter," cried John. "Nobody but Michael could have written that." And Morris did not even claim the credit of priority. Chapter 16. Final adjustment of the leather business. Finsbury brothers were ushered, at 10 the next morning, into a large apartment in Michael's office. The great Vance, somewhat restored from yesterday's exhaustion, but with one foot in a slipper, Morris, not positively damaged, but a man 10 years older than he who had left Bournemouth 8 days before, his face plowed full of anxious wrinkles, his dark hair liberally grizzled at the temples. 3 persons were seated at a table to receive them. Michael in the midst, Gideon Forsyth on his right hand, on his left an ancient gentleman with spectacles and silver hair. "By jingo, it's Uncle Joe," cried John. But Morris approached his uncle with a pale countenance and glittering eyes. "I'll tell you what you did," he cried. "You absconded." "Good morning, Morris Finsbury," returned Joseph, with no less asperity. "You are looking seriously ill." "No use making trouble now," remarked Michael. "Look the facts in the face. Your uncle, as you see, was not so much as shaken in the accident. A man of your humane disposition ought to be delighted." "Then, if that's so," Morris broke forth, "how about the body? You don't mean to insinuate that thing I schemed and sweated for and colported with my own hands was the body of a total stranger?" "Oh, no, we can't go as far as that," said Michael soothingly. "You may have met him at the club." Morris fell into a chair. "I would have found it out if it had come to the house," he complained. "And why didn't it? Why did it go to Pittman? What right had Pittman to open it?" "If you come to that, Morris, what have you done with the colossal Hercules?" asked Michael. "He went through it with the meat axe," said John. "It's all in spillikins in the back garden." "Well, there's one thing," snapped Morris. "There's my uncle again, my fraudulent trustee. He's mine, anyway, and the tontine, too. I claim the tontine. I claim it now. I believe Uncle Masterman's dead." "I must put a stop to this nonsense," said Michael, "and that forever. You say too near the truth. In one sense your uncle is dead and has been so long, but not in the sense of the tontine, which it is even on the cards he may yet live to win. Uncle Joseph saw him this morning. He will tell you he still lives, but his mind is in abeyance." "He did not know me," said Joseph. To do him justice, not without emotion. "So you're out again there, Morris," said John. "My eye, what a fool you've made of yourself." "And that was why you wouldn't compromise," said Morris. "As for the absurd position in which you and Uncle Joseph have been making yourselves an exhibition," resumed Michael, "it is more than time it came to an end. I have prepared a proper discharge in full, which you shall sign as a preliminary." "What?" cried Morris. "And lose my £7,800 in the leather business and the contingent interest and get nothing." "Thank you. It's like you to feel gratitude, Morris," began Michael. "Oh, I know it's no good appealing to you. You sneering devil," cried Morris. "But there's a stranger present. I can't think why, and I appeal to him. I was robbed of that money when I was an orphan, a mere child, at a commercial academy. Since then, I've never had a wish but to get back my own. You may hear a lot of stuff about me, and there's no doubt at times I have been ill-advised. But it's the pathos of my situation. That's what I want to show you." "Morris," interrupted Michael, "I do wish you would let me add one point, for I think it will affect your judgment. It's pathetic, too, since that's your taste in literature." "Well, what is it?" said Morris. "It's only the name of one of the persons who's to witness your signature, Morris," replied Michael. "His name's Moss, my dear." There was a long silence. "I might have been sure it was you," cried Morris. "You'll sign, won't you?" said Michael. "Do you know what you're doing?" cried Morris. "You're compounding a felony." "Very well, then, we won't compound it, Morris," returned Michael. See how little I understood the sterling integrity of your character. I thought you would prefer it so. Look here, Michael, said John. This is all very fine and large, but how about me? Morris has gone up, I see that, but I'm not. And I was robbed, too, mind you, and just as much an orphan, and at the blessed same academy as himself. Johnny, said Michael, don't you think you'd better leave it to me? I'm your man, said John. You wouldn't deceive a poor orphan, I'll take my oath. Morris, you sign that document, or I'll start in and astonish your weak mind. With a sudden alacrity, Morris proffered his willingness. Clerks were brought in, the discharge was executed, and there was Joseph a free man once more. And now, said Michael, hear what I propose to do. Here, John and Morris, is a leather business made over to the pair of you in partnership. I have valued it at the lowest possible figure Pogram and Jerry's is. And here is a check for the balance of your fortune. Now, you see, Morris, you start fresh from the commercial academy. And, as you said yourself, the leather business was looking up. I suppose you'll probably marry before long. Here's your marriage present from a Mr. Moss. Morris bounded on his check with a crimson countenance. I don't understand performance, remarked John. It seems too good to be true. It's simply a readjustment, Michael explained. I take up Uncle Joseph's liabilities, and if he gets a tontine, it's to be mine. If my father gets it, it's mine anyway, you see, so that I'm rather advantageously placed. Morris, my unconverted friend, you've got left, was John's comment. And now, Mr. Forsyth, resumed Michael, turning to the silent guest, here are all the criminals before you, except Pittman. I really didn't like to interrupt his scholastic career, but you can have him arrested at the seminary. I know his hours. Here we are then. We're not pretty to look at. What do you propose to do with us? Nothing in the world, Mr. Finsbury, returned Gideon. I seem to understand that this gentleman, indicating Morris, is the Fons et Origo of the trouble, and from what I gather, he has already paid through the nose. And really, to be quite frank, I do not see who is to gain by any scandal. Not me, at least. And besides, I have to thank you for that brief. Michael blushed. It was the least I could do to let you have some business, he said. But there's one thing more. I don't want you to misjudge poor Pittman, who is the most harmless being upon earth. I wish you would dine with me tonight and see the creature on his native heath. Say it varies. I have no engagement, Mr. Finsbury, replied Gideon. I shall be delighted, but subject to your judgment. Can we do nothing for Man in the Cart? I have qualms of conscience. Nothing but sympathize, said Michael.